Welcome to the stream. I hope you're well. It's been a long time. I haven't streamed in a while, so I'm happy to be here and see you all. Whoever may be joining me today. I'm not entirely sure what the plan is. Oh, I should revise that. I am entirely sure that there is no plan today. We've got maybe one video I have in the queue. I think we'll start with that. Beyond that, we've got nothing. It will be probably a shorter stream than normal too. But we're just chilling out today. Possibly to get back into the swing of things. I think we may be back to our normal schedule next week, but that may be subject to change. We never know these days. Okay, I think we're gonna start soonish. We're starting with our friend Mandy. I like Mandy. She's cool. So we'll be seeing something from Mandy. Something about nothing making you happy. So, I think we'll get into it.
I think that in order to learn most efficiently from teachers.
She's super quiet. She's super quiet for me. Hold on a second. Let me get some boosting going on here. Extreme technical advanced things going in the background. Here we go.
I think that in order to learn.
Still very quiet. One more boost going on here. Okay. Maximum volume.
I think that in order to learn most efficiently from teachers, you have to be able to see and realize like how silly and how imperfect they really are and appreciate them for it. Because everything that you see in somebody else is just what you're seeing in you.
It's all a reflection, right? You can't see what's in your teeth without looking in the mirror. The whole world is your mirror.
So when we see something that we really, really appreciate and really admire, that's us. That's our own appreciation. That's our own inspiration. That's our own light. The light within me recognizes the light within you. And the same for noticing something negative about someone. Well, the reason that realizing that teachers are silly in a way is the same reason realizing that yourself is very silly. And yet all of those other things you might notice as well. It's all of them.
It's all so ridiculous.
I thought about the concept of rarity. And how like we believe that diamonds are rare, and then there's this whole thing you can go into about, well, diamonds naturally occur, they aren't actually rare in some parts of the earth, you'll just find them in the dirt anywhere. But we've created this idea that they're rare. Well, the very idea of rarity is totally self-created. So well, we're trying to be somebody who's rare, somebody who's unique. At the same time, we are actually creating that whole concept of common or rare and not realizing how we're creating it. So,
same thing happens again with a lot of people wanting to find some sort of new teachings. We're talking about teachers here. You want to find some sort of new, unique, special, helpful spiritual teaching. Why? Just use the old ones. They're fine. We don't need to do anything more to it. The old ones to do, and you can hopefully drop those too.
another ironic thing is that nobody wants to be average. Everybody wants to be unique or exceptional in some way. And yet everybody's striving to be normal. And they mean the same thing. You just, with thought and identification, you're just never, ever going to win. Which is why, like, seeing the hilarity in it is really an amazing thing. I was blessed to be raised by a father who just, like, modeled that for me. Like, he would do something stupid and would tell the story and just laugh about it.
Is that what my dad was doing this whole time? That's a good way of putting it. Okay. He still does that. It's a lot of fun. All right, I've got some pu'er today. I've got a can we see this? I can't tell if it's in focus or not. I've got a tea. It's a shui xian. Shui xian, ripe pu'er. It's very nice. It's very clean. I like it. That's what we're drinking.
And so I learned to do it myself. And there were times when I couldn't do it. And I also sort of looked at my own intelligence that way as something that I could never really claim. And that it was just, it was nothing I could ever really decide if I, like, had it or really was very lacking in that way. And come to find out, like, there's sheer brilliance in the being able to laugh at your own stupidity. And when you get into, like, knowing and not knowing and realizing how hypocritical thought is and the whole nature of thought, it becomes such an amazing thing to see as it comes up how you, like, forget and trick yourself, and then you see through it, and it feels like the most wonderful, hilarious thing when you really see through it. So I had this situation come up, and it was like a minor situation, and it's this woman who, like, her personality and everything is so opposite mine, and she's someone that I have to deal with professionally.
Oh no.
Like, every year I have to meet with her. And
every year?
I had to leave her a message, and I don't really like dealing with her. So I left her a message, and then when I was journaling, like, the thought came up that she hadn't replied to my message, and so I needed this answer to my question, but I also didn't actually want to talk to her. So I realized that I was screwed either way. Like, my negative feeling
Can't
about
win.
her in this situation, but feeling like I needed something from her, the ultimate setup, was creating the situation where I felt like I was just screwed either way. There was no way I could possibly win. And right before that, I was looking at this journal entry that I wrote months ago, and I was feeling awful. And so in parentheses, I put, like, my spiritual, like, I would vent out what I was saying. And then in parentheses, I'd put my italicized font, and my spiritual, like, why that isn't right, or why I shouldn't be thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd, like, kind of, like, gone through that and revisited that whole journaling session and why it felt so amazing, because it was one of the most spectacular journal entries I ever wrote. The start of it, I was feeling horrible, and at the end, I was feeling just amazing, because it was like writing that out and seeing that, how that was conflicting so much, how my thoughts were conflicting, I was beating myself up, was so helpful. And so I realized with this situation with this woman, which I was kind of seeing this whole situation in kind of like this humorous, curious, amusing light. And so when I realized I was screwed either way, in parentheses, I wrote unconditionally loved. And it just hit me how like that's like step 2. Like we realize that there's no real like right choice that we can make, that we can't actually know what choice is the right choice. So when you realize, and it's kind of like in this negative tone, that there really is no right choice, that's when you can kind of feel, and it's like, to explain it out, it seems like a big jump, but it just hit me that that's like the unconditional love. So
What a weird jump. Hey, benevolent elephant, what's going on? All is well. It goes well today.
I created this situation where I had this like, it seemed like I couldn't win. It seemed like I had this resistance to it, but I'd like created that, just like we create the concept of like normal and exceptional and rare and common, and try to be one or the other, but we don't want to be weird, but we want to be, and we cannot win.
Don't be weird.
And so once you realize that you cannot win, you cannot lose. You are unconditionally loved. So I'm just now realizing or remembering my original intentions for this video. So I can laugh about how stupid I am that it took this long to get around to it and actually remember what I was going to.
We're 8 minutes into the video. Getting to the point.
Or what I was planning to talk about. But what keeps astounding me lately, and what I keep kind of laughing about, is how in thought, or always I believed, that happiness was found in situations and things and circumstances and people, and so I was separate from it, and it was found in a thing, and I was a thing, but I wasn't a thing, and that was a whole bunch of confusion, but I was trying to figure it out and couldn't just let it go and realize that I didn't know. And so when I came across, I think it was like a Rupert Spira book that I read that in, and it hit me, and I had realized that that was the answer to what I was questioning about.
Other things hitting her.
So I realized,
is there a better metaphor for things hitting you when you, I guess, understand something? I suppose the phenomena is an epiphany. Is there a better way of describing that? I guess you could just say I had an epiphany, or I understood it immediately. Suddenly, it all came to me. But what is this hitting me thing? Why do things need to be so violent? Let's stop the hitting.
as things start to feel kind of off or bad, or I have thoughts that feel bad, and it's funny because there's, as you're letting go of thought, there's also a lot of like really stepping back and examining things. And instead of just like running on autopilot, you're examining things. And in a way, it's like taking a day to optimize your computer programs and like clear a whole bunch of clutter off your computer and learn, like, see if there's updates for a bunch of programs you're using.
Does anybody do that? People do this? They like have a whole day for optimizing their computer? Maybe I should do that. I've never done that before in my life.
If you're doing work on a computer, you appreciate like how important it is to stop and optimize things. And in a way, it's like we're doing that. But so sometimes it actually takes effort, and yet it's actually results in a letting go of all this unnecessary effort. So like as thoughts start to come up, I start to see this pattern where I think that my happiness is a result of the season or the activity or whatever else. And the reason that we can make this misunderstanding really is a result of how absolutely loved we are, that it seems as if we can find pleasure in things. It seems as if
Anybody speak Russian or whatever language that is? Give me a moment. It's a little translation. Let's find out what this guy's saying. Hey, what's up, guy? Do I watch anime? What a question. I think the answer, niet. Niet anime. Niet.
we want to have this experience and where everything's kind of like heightened by our creativity, and like the experience of eating chocolate seems pleasurable and seems to bring all these good feelings, and yet at the same time, this is how addictions are created. Like, I love this thing, but I hate this thing. And so we bring in all these, like when we think it's an object, and when we're in thinking, we're sort of like in that matrix of thought, then we bring in duality. And so what we love, we also must hate. And when we actually let in love and are able to just let go of the thought and realize the connection with, oh, when I get something good, I drop thoughts that say, I'm not feeling good, something, I don't have what I want right now. And so we equate it to the thing rather than equating it to the lack of any thoughts that say what I want isn't present right now. This whole subject seemed to be the theme of the day yesterday. And I was talking to my dad about it when I was over to my parents' house. And they have some new neighbors, and for whatever reason, they would just start blasting part of a song, and then the music would stop, and then it would blast again.
TikTok.
And
That's what it
they
sounds like.
blasted the song Love Hurts. So I looked that up this morning, and it's a really good song. But like the misunderstanding in it, is like it's an example. It's a very funny effect of this. And here's the line, I know a thing or two. And when you equate that with non-duality, like I know a thing or two, it's really very funny. And so when we try to secure love, we run into a whole bunch of problems. And when we try it, we think that we love another person and that might be something that we could lose, and so it has to be secured. Then we invite in a whole bunch of hurt. But why would we be able to hurt? Why would love hurt? We love feeling love. So when we don't feel love, obviously it hurts. And that's where it's another stunning revelation. It's so simple, like how reality could be so good that it's so simple that when something feels bad to us, the thought isn't aligned with love. It isn't true. The best way I can explain this connection with feeling or with love or with source, or how you are one and two at the same time, or neither of those, you're not two, is the best way to explain it. But was my initial realization of non-duality was when I looked at a tree, and it was one tree that split into two trees. And me and my son were there recently, and he was talking about the subject, and so I showed him the tree, and it was just like the perfect time to explain it to him.
What was the subject? He
was
talking about non-duality, your kid? That's interesting. How do we I don't know how do we define an individual tree. So for one tree to be one tree and to separate into two trees, I don't even know what that means. How do you like separate what is the division point for one tree and multiple trees? Especially when you can do a lot of trees you can cut them and they'll grow independently. I don't know how that works.
Asked him, is that one or two? And he's like, it's both. It's both at the same time.
Move.
So we always have this, like we always are that connection. It's like the absolute best of both worlds. It's having your cake and eating it too. That you can, like within, find love from and with another person. You can focus your love that way, or for a thing, or for a bird, or for a specific place, or a book, or whatever else. And at the same time, that's you. You are the creator of it. You are doing it. You are it. It's always reflected back at you. In fact, it does not have to go anywhere. I just cannot get over how lucky I am. And I realize that's all like going within the story to realize, like look back and see how all these realizations came about. And that it's essentially more than that, realizing like how I am the creator of luck. So it's beyond being lucky or unlucky. It's the author of the story. It's the creator of it.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's more to the video if you guys want to watch it. It's from Mandy Ramsdale. I like her. Watch more if you wish. Learn to get the best of both worlds through non-duality. Wow.
It seems to me in meditation practice that there's often the mistaken idea, I suppose, that we're ever supposed to get rid of something in your mind, get rid of part of your being, or suppress it, or eradicate it. You know, these kind of ideas.
It's a nice shot. I like this place, wherever this place is. It looks pretty nice. There's no duality and non-duality. That is duality. Life is imagination. No worlds exist. Interesting. What does existence mean there? If no worlds exist, what do you mean by existence?
Not really correct. You know, it's not that you strip everything away until there's nothing else left in a quantitative fashion. This is a part of the confusion. It's not that, that's not how it works. Once you're caught up in this idea of quantitative, there is too much of something that needs removing, then you're a little bit stuck. You're kind of caught in a kind of illusion, because if you're talking about energy, qi, sure, maybe we could talk about it to do with quantities. That's possible, because it's kind of borderline having a form, sort of. But once you're talking about the mind, of course it's not quantitative. There's not I don't have a certain amount of personality traits I need to get rid of, and then I'm down to the sort of nitty-gritty of the true self or something. It's not how it works. And it's not like you have too much anger that you have to get rid of. It's not like there's a bucket full of it and it needs emptying out. It doesn't work this way. Counter to that, I suppose you could argue that maybe there's a certain degree of qi trapped in the system. If you're into qigong models that needs removing, all right, possibly. But still, at the root of that, the thing that's producing that energy is still an aspect of your mind that isn't quantity based. So it's not that something needs removing. You know, but they do use the word remove. They use the strip away. They use the word to get rid of, to clean, to sort of shed. You know, but they don't really mean it in a quantitative way. What they mean is that ultimately, if you realize the nature of something, then what is lost is not the thing,
What's lost?
but the hold that it has over you.
The significance or the importance, or, well, he said it good. The hold it has over you. Interesting. You don't lose the thing stays the same. It remains itself. It's still whatever it was before you saw through it. However, you saw through it. So it no longer affects you in that important, significant, salient way.
And that's the big distinction. So if I recognize the nature of anger or rage or envy or guilt or remorse or whatever that sits within me, once I see it for what it is, then it doesn't have a hold over me. It's gone. Its grip is gone. So have I shed that thing? Have I shed the guilt? Have I shed the anger? Well, I've shed the attachment I have to it, and I've shed the power that it has over me, I suppose. But is that quantitative? Not really. It's qualitative, isn't it?
Isn't it?
I think it's a quality that's changed due to your level of insight. So, really, the biggest factor where this comes into play really is your emotional makeup, isn't it? Because there's a real divide in the kind of, what do you call it, the alternative scene, the new age scene, I don't know, whatever it is, where...
You just call this the alternative scene? Are we new agers? Are we alternative? What are we? The consciousness scene, maybe? Spiritual scene, maybe? Okay, whatever we want to call it.
There's kind of two schools of thought that are appearing, and you only have to do a quick research on social media to see that these two kind of viewpoints are appearing, and social media is very good for that, is it can give you very quickly a kind of overview of the kind of general consensus of what people think. It doesn't give you accuracy on very many things, definitely not, but it does give you an overview of what people are thinking at the moment, which is why certain entities may seem to control social media, as we're discovering, you know, in certain ways, because they want to distort the view that we have of what the consensus is. But right now, with regards to the alternative scene, with regards to your emotions specifically, I see two sort of key mindsets coming out. There's the very, I guess it's a kind of classical or traditionalist view that's more in line certainly with Chinese teachings, which is like you need to shed the emotions and get rid of them. The emotions are a pathogen, which is, you know, something that was written about in certain classical texts. And once you're free of emotions, then there's a stillness. So there's that view.
Get rid of all your emotions. Okay. Easy.
That's quite a commonly held view. And I think it's seen as almost, it's almost like a bit conservative, isn't it? That's how it's kind of viewed, the more conservative practitioners of Buddhism or Taoism or Hinduism or whatever.
Interesting.
And then you get the other view, which is more the liberal one, I suppose, the sort of contemporary New Age scene, which is very much your emotions are guidance systems that direct you where to go. And I think this idea, I don't know where this idea came from, but I think it came from one or two very prolific kind of younger spiritual teachers. I think this is where it comes from, that your emotions are a guidance system and you're supposed to follow them, and you're almost supposed to kind of like respect them, and there's a kind of
respect your emotions. They're coming from your higher self to subconsciously guide you through life, and your subconscious is never wrong and your higher self is always correct, that kind of thing, maybe.
Indulgence in them almost that kind of underpins that idea. And I mean, these two are both quite extreme, aren't they? They're both opposite extremes. I suppose then you have a third school where people want to convert them into more virtuous ways of being, which is more in line with many of the Buddhist schools, isn't it? That there are emotions that are counterproductive to your development and also counterproductive to the good of other people. And then there are emotions that are productive for you and for the people around you, and you're supposed to transmute the negative emotions into the sort of positive ones, the ones that are beneficial for your training. And there's all kinds of
emotional alchemy. Interesting. Emotional alchemy. What do I think about that? The emotional guidance. Well, they're both of them seem like fine ways of existing in the world. You choose whichever one you prefer, or whatever your tradition tells you, or don't bother. Depends on you, I guess. I like the water. The sound of the flowing water is nice. Yeah, so you can either try to reject all your emotions if you're into rejecting all your emotions and hiding away from them and suppressing and whatever. If you're good at it, go for it, I guess. And if you want to listen to your emotions, that sounds like fun too. Your emotions are pretty cool sometimes, right? You can ride them and allow them to tell you everything to do. That sounds like it's fun too. I don't know. I have no particular preference. Emotions are cool, but they're not necessary, I think.
Precepts and practices and meditations around that. So I guess that's the third view, isn't it? I think that they all have their merit. They all have their merit, but all three of them really rely on one thing that you have to do, really, and that is to see the truth of what the emotions are.
Oh.
I mean, that's really...
You must see through your emotions. Either way. This, that, or the other, you must see your emotions for what they are. Okay, so whether you want to ignore your emotions and suppress them, or you want to give in to your emotions and see them as guidance, whichever one, you need to have very keen awareness, step one, for all of these. So we can just start there. Easy.
I mean, if I'm going to go with the first camp and I want to get rid of them, well, if to get rid of them, I have to know what they are. I need to know what I'm getting rid of, so I need to see them. If I'm going to go with the second camp and follow them and just let them be a complete guidance systems and rule my life, because I don't like that camp. I think it's a bit self-indulgent, a bit sort of I think it places too much importance. I think it makes you selfish, I think, that view. I think the first view can make you a bit cold. I think the second one can make you a bit selfish. But, you know, I guess this idea has arisen because a lot of people are maybe a bit emotionally repressed or stunted, and maybe that's what they need at the moment. So maybe it's just a stage, but I don't think it's a healthy stage to stay at for too long. But if I am going to follow my emotions, I still need to know what they are.
Yep.
And then the third camp, to transform them from something that's negative to something that's beneficial.
The emotional alchemy.
Still going to know what they are. You need to know what the emotions are. So for me, as I said at the beginning, getting rid of the emotions really means getting rid of the hold that they have over you. That's what they're talking about. You'll never fully shed yourself of emotions, short of some form of brain damage or psychological illness. They're always going to be there, because your emotions essentially are the reaction to a sensory experience. So as long as you're having a sensory experience, right now I can hear the fountains, and I can smell maybe a bonfire over here, and I can hear a little bit of the traffic and some of the animal. You know, there's all these kind of sensory experiences around me, and each of these generates some kind of emotion. I either feel pleasant or I feel unpleasant. I'm quite comfortable here, I like it. So that's generating a kind of background emotion in me. I'm never going to get rid of that. You know, I might be able to move temporarily towards a state where those things aren't at the front of my awareness, which would be during meditation for me. When the sense faculties go away and I step back from them, but still I still going to have the emotions to interact with the world. So like I say, for me, it's not getting rid of them, it's getting rid of the hold that they have over you. And as much as anything, getting rid of the hold they have over you means to know what they are. That's the first step. You need to know what they are. So maybe it's different from classical teachings, it probably is, deviated a little, but I think that we can separate emotions and feelings and moods. I think they're three different things: emotions, feelings, and
emotions, feelings, and moods. Now, I don't know what the distinctions are between these. Hopefully he gets into this a bit. I always like, whenever we find any word that's a synonym, just make a new concept and make it more subtle and make it more specific and narrow. I think you can very easily do this. But what will be the difference between an emotion, a feeling, and a mood? Oh, that's pretty subtle there, huh? That's pretty subtle. I like it though. Certainly feelings can be much more broad than emotions, I think. But mood? Okay, hopefully he gives us a bit of a guide here, or at least tells us what he thinks of it personally. I like this clarity, more distinctions, more precision. I'm a fan.
Moods. Well, this is what I see in myself when I'm looking to see how I am formed and how I react to the world, you know? So to me, if we very briefly, emotions to me are just labels. That's it. Like people have, they say energy in motion, emotion, and things like this. And I guess emotion probably, I don't know, but it probably comes from the root of movement of something. I can't imagine it means energy in motion. Can't imagine that the root of the letter E has its energy in, has its root in the word for energy. I should have looked it up, shouldn't I? But I would imagine it's more to do with movement, something that moves you from your center or moves you into action or moves you to do something. I mean, you even talk about emotions moving us. That was very moving. So I guess it's probably rooted in there. But to me, I think that...
But of course, we don't really care about the roots because we're trying to make the concept much more refined and much more clear. We don't want to go back to the initial concept because the initial concept is probably too broad and not specific enough. Probably. That's just my opinion, though. I don't like etymologies. That's just my opinion and my bias.
Emotions are just labels.
Labels, okay.
And I'm sure some people hearing that will disagree with me and say that I don't recognize the beauty in emotions. But actually it's because I think what a lot of people are defining as emotions, to me, are feelings. Mm-hmm. And I think they're different. Oh. I think you need to come out of your emotions into your feelings, and I'll explain why. I think emotions are things that are very easy to label, aren't they? So we have the emotion of anger, the emotion of happiness, the emotion of disgust, the emotion of, guilt, the emotion of jealousy. There's a plethora, isn't there? I mean, if I were to write out every emotion a human being could have, there's quite a lot of them. And we can generally put some of them under broader categories. And anyone who
Did you name any good ones in that list? Name more good emotions.
Studied Taoism or Chinese medicine knows that we put them under broad elemental categories. But still there's a whole range of them, but they're all labelable, right? Mm-hmm. So you could probably, with most people, that once you've had a series of experiences in your life, which means to have lived for a little while, then you kind of recognize in yourself the emotion that somebody else is having. So in the majority of cases, you can kind of label what they're having, can't you? You can kind of go, oh, they're experiencing guilt right now, or, oh, they're upset right now, they're experiencing grief right now. And we can kind of get it partially from what they say, partially from their body language, and partially maybe from something a little bit more subtle where we just kind of read it. And sometimes we get emotions wrong, don't we? I mean, I know that because a lot of the time people get my emotions wrong. It's very strange.
Here. Same here. Isn't it really weird when people read you incorrectly and they give it back to you and it's like, oh, that's really weird and wrong. Or maybe I'm reading my own emotions wrong. I don't know. One of us is wrong here because that does not align with how I'm analyzing the situation. It's fascinating, but I guess we can do the same thing. Just read everybody completely wrong. How awful.
In teaching courses, felt over the moon, like really enjoying teaching the course for a couple of days in front of 100 people on a stage or something, talking through a concept, get to the end and people have said to me, oh, you were so angry throughout that course. And I'm really confused because I didn't experience any anger whatsoever. And then on other courses where maybe, I remember one course in particular.
I'm gonna try, okay. I like that. He just verbalized this experience that people can have. You have a particular emotion, someone else reads it differently, and they give it to you, and you're confused, and you're like, what? That's not at all the emotion that I had. However, now, next time that happens to me, or to you, or to anybody else, hopefully we can see it and not be confused, because we don't need to be confused. It happens often. We already know that this is a situation that can occur. We already know that people read your emotions incorrectly. Why do we need to be confused about it? Why do we need to add more emotions to it? So don't bother. Next time you're happy, you're over the moon, and somebody thinks that you're angry, okay. I knew what would happen. It happens all the time, obviously. You don't need to be confused. No more confusion to add into the mix. That's your instruction for next time that ever happens. Okay, don't be confused.
A Chinese medicine course I had to teach on diagnostics, and right before I had to go in to teach course, one of my family members was very, very sick and was hospitalized. And it was a little bit of a concern, but I had to teach the course. So I walked in and obviously this is playing on my mind. So I was I got to the end of the course and my perception of it was, oh no, I didn't do a very good job there because I was kind of distracted by what was going on with my family member. So I went to apologize to the group at the end because I hadn't told them what was happening. I thought, I apologize for not being myself, you know. And everybody thought I'd been really happy throughout the course. They said, oh, you were in such a good mood. It was one of the most joyful courses I've ever seen you teach. So the very fact that people had not only got my emotions wrong, but also completely
opposite.
Got it asked to face. They'd really got the opposite of what I was feeling. It wasn't just a little bit wrong. It was opposite end of the spectrum. It really highlights to me just how easily we can make mistakes with people's emotions, which also means we can make mistake with people's personality very much as well, and judge them incorrectly. You can see that a lot on social media. So why I'm talking about this is because these emotions are just labels, but I don't think they're accurate. I think this is a part of the problem, because once something is labeled, we know that it's not true if we're to follow the teachings of Taoism, because they say that which can be named is not the real thing.
That which it cannot be named is not the real thing. Is that precisely the teaching? We don't need to get into that. What does it even mean to be an accurate label? I don't like this. I don't like this. If nothing can be accurate, what does the word even refer to? Nothing can be it. What does it even mean? Surely there can be, maybe there's a more helpful concept other than accuracy. If nothing can be accurate, then we don't need to reference it ever. We can just refer to something else that's more, that actually refers to something, maybe, possibly. And we can just drop the label accuracy, potentially. But I wonder what he would mean by accurate, such that nothing can be accurate, no label can be accurate. Fascinating. I wonder too if we subconsciously overcompensate for our behavior for the subtle fear that these emotions show. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's possible. Right? If we're very sad, we don't want people to think that we're sad, so we subconsciously smile a little bit more, laugh a little bit more, so on and so forth. Interesting. Yeah, there's potential. Big potential there.
Paraphrased, but you know what I mean, start of the Tao Te Ching. And what they're implying is essentially once something is labeled, specifically within the realm of the mind, because the Tao Te Ching primarily talks about meditation, not politics, like a lot of commentators seem to think, but it talks about meditation. And they tell us that once something is labeled, once something is named, it is now incorrect because it is subject to a kind of clinging, a kind of solidity. And this is what happens with your emotions. So as an example of this, if I took 5 people, I've done this actually, I have literally done it several times with groups of students, and I've asked them to describe a feeling that they all know. So I don't tend to choose something really obvious like anger. Guilt is always a good one. I
think he was slightly making room for a spacious view without definitions and distinctions. Okay, not really completely throwing out definitions and distinctions. Okay, just making it not too tightly grasped. All right, this is in reference to accuracy for concepts here. Okay, we don't need to throw out labels, but we can have space for other things beyond the label. Okay. Yeah. We expect the labels to stick, but we object. But the object we've labeled is changing every moment, every single moment. Yes, the labels are, the referent of the label is changing. Yes. And I guess if the goal is to label something and for it to be remaining the same, and for your label to always reference the exact same thing, not something that is changing, that would be very strange, and that would not be possible. And such, if that's the concept of accuracy, I guess you can't be accurate. But maybe there are other concepts that may be more helpful, other than accuracy.
Guilt, because a lot of people, well, all of us have been guilty about something at some point in our life, and we all know what guilt is, and it might be something minor, it might be something major, but it is something that we've all had, I'm sure, unless you're a complete sociopath or you've always been really nice. So you choose an emotion like this, and then I ask people to describe the emotion, and they always say, well, I feel guilty, or I am guilty, and it's like, well, okay, but that's not good enough, because what does guilt feel like? So let me describe guilt. Guilt feels to me like it's a little warm. My body gets a bit hotter when I'm experiencing guilt, and then something tightens under my ribs around my diaphragm, and then there's maybe a little bit of a knot in the solar plexus, and maybe a little bit of tightening here, but there's a series of feelings. And if I conjure up, or sort of take my mind to a place of feeling guilty, generally I'll get a very similar kind of process running through in the same order. So
Interesting.
to me, that is the feeling of guilty rather than the labeled, named emotion of guilty. Now it's the feeling of guilty because I'm literally feeling it. So the reason this
Guilt is not one that I understand. The reason why I laughed before is because I don't quite get guilty. I don't get it at all, really. I don't understand what it is that people are feeling here. You're guilty if you've done something. I've been responsible for doing things, certainly. I don't feel responsible for doing anything. And particularly, I guess, guilt, generally people think of doing something wrong, right? I've been responsible for breaking laws, but I've never felt like some sort of emotion in regards to that before. So I don't quite understand guilty personally, but okay. Interesting. It's warm. Okay.
is important is because, well, there's two things. The first, there's always a few in there. I'm obsessed with lists. The first is that when I ask those 4 or 5 people to describe guilt, they won't give me the same description.
Mm-hmm.
There will be maybe a general ballpark kind of description that's very similar, generally gets people in a similar part of the body, but they won't feel it the same. So maybe I felt it a little bit hotter, then tightness in the ribs, solar plexus, tightness in the neck. Maybe they feel it. One or the other person might suddenly get a little bit of a sinking feeling, and then a muscle kind of tightens somewhere else, and then maybe they feel a bit nauseous, or there's pressure behind the eyes, like they feel they're going to cry or something. So therefore, that person is having a completely different feeling than I am having. And out of those 5 people, probably those 5 people have slightly different experiences, or maybe very different experiences. And if you ask 1,000 people, is there 1,000 different experiences or feelings? But we all call it the same, guilt. So the other thing that happens is if you don't have a label for an emotion, you probably don't remember because that's so long ago. So long ago, like when you were young, you probably didn't have access to the full repertoire of emotions. So you might have experienced anger at a young age, sadness or grief or loss at a kind of young age, and already kind of learned what they were. But then maybe some emotions came later. One of the biggest ones that probably came a bit later was romantic love, right? You might have had a connection to family, but romantic love for the opposite gender or the same gender, depending on your orientation, probably came at a slightly older age, right? Maybe towards puberty, or maybe even earlier than that. But what I'm saying is not while you're 5 years old, is it? Normally it's a bit later, unless you're developmentally abnormal perhaps, but I would say it comes a bit later. So it's a good example for us to think of, because if you remember the first ever time you fell in love, that kind of giddy, hormonal loss of your sense of self kind of thing, which was probably at quite a young age, but not really young, probably sort of a child, but it'll be within your recollection. It was a very confusing feeling and almost quite overbearing. And it's quite overbearing, in my opinion, usually not because it's a particularly strong emotion compared to the others, because I would say anger and hatred are also very strong, but it's overbearing because you didn't have a label for it at the time. And it was a new experience. So what happens is that kind of crazy kind of love was all of a sudden couldn't be labeled. And because it wasn't labeled, you had to experience the full range of feelings that it generated. The warmth and the relaxation and the discomfort and the confusion, or whatever it generated in you, the arousal, who knows, like all these different things. Now, to each of us, it might have been different. Some might have.
Okay, so I guess if we have the feelings without the label won't distract you from the feeling, and you feel a wider range of feelings rather than like cutting off some of your feelings and no longer paying attention to them and then having a label to just call it something. I think that's what he's getting at here so far. We also have a mood that he hasn't explained, the third part. A mood. There's also a mood that's related to emotions and feelings, but distinct. So we'll get into that soon, I'm sure. Okay, interesting.
Felt it literally in the heart.
Cloud, what does the love feel like? Is it a feeling? Is it an emotion? If you love this man, I'm not sure if you're referring to me or to Damo. If you love this man, is it a feeling in your chest? Is it permeating through your body? Where is the love? How does it feel? Tell me more about it. get more distinct with our emotions and our feelings.
of them in the solar plexus, some in the guts, you know. But we all had to go through it, probably, most of us. If you've never been in love, you can't use that as an example, obviously, but, you know, bear with me. And I'm sure if not, you've seen it in movies, so you can kind of follow along.
Okay.
So the reason that's important is because if you think about what happens as you go through your life and you meet other people and you fall in love other times, because most of us are falling in love more than once, right? What starts to happen is that feeling each time becomes less and less strong. Now that might sound really mean, and some people will be saying, well, that's a horrible thing. I'm just being honest. Don't they say that your first love is always the most powerful? Why? Why?
Is that true? Do you guys feel like your emotions become less intense over time, or your first love is the most powerful? It's definitely not my experience, but that's interesting. Okay.
Is your first love the most powerful? Why the first? I'll tell you why. It's because if you fell in love with 5 people, say, but the first person you fell in love with, you didn't have a label for that emotion, so you had to experience the feeling. By the second time you fell in love with someone, you kind of recognized it. Oh, right, there's that similar somatic experience my body is going through. So you labeled it, oh, I'm in love. And then by the third time, you only probably had to have the seed of that feeling, the start of it.
You feel like that, especially sexual feelings. Oh my God. That sounds horrible. I mean, well, not horrible, but how many times do you have sexual feelings? And every time it diminishes a little bit. It sounds awful. I'm sorry to hear that, I guess. They ran over you at 13, but now it's just like, oh, okay, I got feelings. Interesting. Oh, well, I guess you don't see it as sad, so maybe it's not so sad, but it seems kind of strange. Why would they lose? Okay. That's not my experience. But okay.
Oh, I'm in love. By the 5th time, probably the feeling was so far back in your subconscious or your unconscious that you just kind of intellectually realized almost I'm in love, and maybe a bit of warmth in the body. But see, the feeling died and became less strong because you labeled it, because you recognized what it was. Now, I would say this
can never experiencing something for the first time. That's true. Experiencing something for the first time is different from experiencing it from other times. But that's just like surprise, right? Like you can get surprised by watching something for the first time, or like, I really like listening to music. And of course, it's very surprising to hear something for the first time. But I don't think that surprise is not, I don't think the surprise is very important or good, even. It's just like, okay, that was surprising. But then I like to listen to it more times and, really experience things multiple times and get further into it. And I think it gets better. I think it's much, much better, actually. The more repetition is much more, it's just better to me. It seems like the first time it's like you're just exploring the space for the first time. You're learning things. You're getting exposed to certain things. It is new. It is interesting, I suppose. It is surprising, and you definitely don't experience any surprise later on. But man, the future, for me personally, the future experiences, the repetitive things, it's much better, I think.
This is what happens to all of your emotions, because I would imagine that during your developmental years, certainly watching babies and watching young, very, very young children go through emotional experiences that
it doesn't diminish. It just doesn't have, it's not as interesting. Interesting. It doesn't have the wow anymore. Okay. I can understand maybe the wow part as the surprise that I was referring to, but I think of it as more interesting, I think. If I'm cultivating it, it gets better. If you're not cultivating it, it gets buried by the label and lack of interest. Oh, I see. Okay. There's a certain betterness to knowing the experience well, but there's also a certain wildness to the first time. Yeah, there's a certain wildness. I can understand that. There's a bit of surprise for the first time. But I don't really particularly like surprise. So, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I guess I could see that. I can see that. Every experience is a new experience, even if that experience has been experienced already. True. True. trying to have an experience and refer to the older experience, right? Trying to connect them and say that they're the same. That's also a new experience. No surprise birthday parties for Zach. Yeah, I'm a big not fan of surprise birthday parties or surprise gifts or surprise anything. I don't like surprises. I'm not a fan at all. No surprise for me, please. Zero surprises. Not a fan.
They've not had before. It's overbearing for them. It's incredibly strong. You can see it. It's like they're overtaken by an incredibly strong drug. It doesn't matter what the emotion is. Happiness turns into a kind of mania, doesn't it, with babies, and then the annoyance, that anger turns into sort of despairing, like their world has ended because they're even a tiny bit annoyed. And we might say that it's because they're not emotionally intelligent yet, and I would say actually it's because they're not emotionally labeled yet. So because they're not emotionally labeled, they're going through
What up, Mirror Man? How you doing today? Welcome.
the feeling, they're going through the experience. So hopefully that makes sense, right? So basically by labeling an emotion, we kind of lump everybody in as having the same experience when they're not. They're having different experiences. We're all experiencing anger or guilt or grief differently. And also by labeling it, you're kind of shutting yourself off from feeling it, because your mind and your body have a weird relationship that once something is recognized intellectually, you stop experiencing it on a bodily level. Not in all cases. Pain or suffering, maybe not, because we have strange attachments to those, as the Buddhists pointed out long ago. But a lot of our other emotional experiences, if you can label it, it moves into the intellectual mind. So that doesn't mean you're not overtaken by that.
That's fascinating that it apparently for all emotions, if you label them, they remove themselves from the sort of actual feeling and it goes intellectual, except for a couple of the negative emotions. It's kind of a weird thing there and kind of makes me skeptical of the whole concept that he's laying out. That's interesting though. I like what he said earlier that, of course, like we probably need a better understanding of what an emotion is, as opposed to thinking that it's one precise thing that everybody's experiencing. For an individual, it's probably a range of things that we label to be one particular, like we have one label for a range of emotions or a range of, the range is the one emotion. I don't know how we would describe this. There are different feelings that happen. There's a range of feelings that we would label one emotion. Let's call it that, I think. And that there's a range for an individual person, and there's ranges for other individual people, and there's like range, like a wider range for the whole collective that we would label the same thing, one emotion. Let's say love. It's a range of things that we would label love, but it doesn't refer to one precise exact thing that everybody would precisely be exactly the same. So yeah, we probably do need to update our understanding there and consider that. Definitely. I like this. Can never experience what it is to be a certain age. After that certain age, you only experience a memory of the original experience. So it's diminished in a way because it's not directly. Interesting. Every perceivable moment in a linear time is lost to the void. All there is right now in our memories of what was before and the idea that there was a before, blah, 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 blah. There's only now. There's only here.
That emotion, because for example, if you're angry, you can get caught up in that emotion, but you often intellectually know you're angry, but you're not going through the same feeling as if it wasn't labeled. I hope that makes sense.
It makes sense.
So this also has relevance to, if we stick with anger, say, as an emotion, it also has relevance to how impure that emotion can be at any time, right? Because I'm sorry, I'm just looking over here because I'm keeping an eye on the time. Make sure I don't talk for too long.
No worries.
Because essentially, say you experience anger. Maybe someone makes you angry, or maybe I don't know, somebody calls you a name, or
So I wonder if he's probably going to get into the opposite, but I also get the sense that having labels makes it easier to be more precise. So, you can experience certain things much. I'll just say better, because that's a fine word, I think. You can experience things better if you have labels for it. Sometimes, not all things, sometimes. Of course, he's saying that having a label is necessarily intellectual. He didn't actually use those words precisely, but he seems to be implying that using labels is necessarily intellectual, and I don't have that position. I don't think you always intellectualize things when you verbalize them. I don't think every label is an intellectual process. And I think some labels are very helpful for actually experiencing things much more clearly and more precisely and more narrowly. I always like to talk about music theory because I like music personally, but if you have particular language for music, you can hear the music better. You can actually like hear the music more clearly if you have ways of labeling the music. So, and the same thing would potentially convert to emotions. You can actually feel your emotions more clearly, some emotions, if you can actually label some parts of your emotion, I would think. So maybe we can get into that opposite part. Hopefully he can get to the opposite part too. Terence McKenna has a thing about language. Okay, interesting. He's good at labeling. Oh, once the label is understood, you can throw away the label. Exactly. Yes, very good. Yeah, you don't want to get stuck at the label or the theoretical level here. You can always use it to more clearly experience whatever it is that you're experiencing, and then you can drop the label and not be distracted by that. Go beyond it, of course. Yeah.
Pisses you off, or you feel they undermine your rights or don't give you the service you deserve, or something like this, right? And what that does is it generates a little bit of anger in you. The feeling of anger starts to be generated. So again, maybe that feeling was a rising up inside the body and a tightening of the muscles, maybe a hot in the head or something, I don't know, whatever your somatic experiences of the movement of that feeling that we've labeled as anger. But what happens is your mind works very much on association. So when you're angry about one thing, you're often angry about everything that's ever made you angry. That's what happens, because say somebody said a mean thing to me and it upset.
It may not be that every piece of Damo's concepts are perfect from every angle, but in general, I think he's taking a much more difficult surgical approach, that can yield lots of benefits than a bypass approach may. Not be able to open. Even if there are different angles, maybe most of the merit and benefit is engaging in the approach itself. Certainly, I think the way that he's labeling, the way that he's defining these things is very good. I mean, I really, 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 really like this. I like how he's separating lots of things and being much more clear than the typical concepts that are laid out in common culture. I like this quite a bit. So I do want to, I guess I should express that I like what he's doing, and I'm pushing it a little bit further into how I would describe it in my own language, in my own way of viewing it. But I'm not saying that what he's doing is bad or wrong or anything. I like what he's doing a lot. I appreciate it quite a bit. Good stuff.
I mean, it made me angry. And then maybe a second person did the same, and a third person, a fourth person, a fifth person, and we've all been made angry many times. What will happen is your mind will start to lump all those together, because again, it's labeling. So the first time you're ever made angry, it's an overbearing feeling. By the time you're in your childhood, you recognize it as anger. So the feeling is still there, but you become lost more in the mind side of it, the intellectual mind. By the time you're a teenager and then an adult, you don't even go through the full experience of the feeling anymore. The feeling is there, but you're more caught up in the emotion rather than the feeling, in the label of it.
In the label.
And
Remember, he's saying emotion means the label. So you're caught in the labels rather than the actual thing. You don't even experience life anymore. You're just experiencing labels. And what does it mean to experience a label? It doesn't mean anything. It's just labels. Get out of here with that. I just mean his general approach. I appreciate his very non-bypass approach, not with regards to how I've been reacting. Okay. His non-bypass approach. We don't want this sort of bypassing things. No need to bypass anything. No bypass. I'm going to go back to the watch from the beginning. Just want to be part now. Special fear. Yeah. This video here is called Kill the Emotions from Damo Mitchell. You want to watch back from the beginning. And I quite like his channel.
The problem with this is that it will then go back through your databases, your memory banks, and it will bring up all of the similar occurrences you've had of anger. So what this means is when you're angry at that person for being rude to you, often you're angry, and not just that person, but all of the people you've ever been angry at, or certainly all of the ones that have been bad enough that it's left a mark on you, you know? And we see this
explaining
because
suppressed emotions. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, right? It is sort of like a suppressed emotion if you're just thinking about the label and not actually feeling it. He's using different labels here because he's calling emotions the label and not the feeling. But you want to feel whatever it is that you're feeling and not just think about whatever you feel your emotions, you don't think your emotions. But if you have all these labels, you're probably thinking your emotions a lot of times. And that's an issue, and that's what he's describing her. I like this part here, how all of your emotions are connected. So if you experience an emotion anytime, but this seems to go against what he was saying before. Oh, I wonder how he can think about this and connect this, right? So if you feel any emotion, it references every single time that you've ever felt that emotion. So if you're ever angry at something now, if I'm angry now at a person, I'm also simultaneously every single instance of anger is alive in my life. Only my life? Every single instance of anger that has ever happened in the universe for any person ever is also coming back. And now we're using the broad definition of anger again, not a precise single thing, because that doesn't exist, obviously, and that doesn't repeat. Whatever this broad sort of range of emotions that we call anger, all of those happen at the same time every single time you get angry. But that'd be weird if that happened. Why would the anger be less intense as you continue? That wouldn't make any sense. It doesn't seem to make any sense from how I'm thinking about it now. Well, that's interesting. Well, anyway, I always like to say something quite similar, that if you're angry, you'll be angry at everything. It doesn't, like, when you are angry, you are the kind of the angry thing, and it doesn't matter what input you have in the world, everything is going to cause your anger because you're already angry. Whenever you're angry, everything makes you angry. Whenever you're bored, everything makes you bored. Something similar to that. But anyway, I like this. This is a very good way of putting it. If you're angry, you are evoking every single instance of anger that you've ever had in your lifetime. This is how he's saying it, at least, and potentially beyond. I'm adding that. Every single instance of anger is occurring, and you're referencing that. I wonder why that would make it less intense, though. I like this.
With anger, people can become angry at an inanimate object, can't they? Maybe the TV remote control isn't working because the battery's loose or something, and instead of logically going...
Yeah, I like in how he's saying it, Damo is saying this, having more references makes it less intense. I don't understand that, but it's interesting. I'd like to get more of a grasp on how he's conceptualizing that. Because the references bring you into thought and out of feeling. Interesting, but I don't think he means literally if I'm angry at an individual person, I'm not literally, maybe literally is not the right word, I'm not directly thinking about intellectually other instances of anger, I don't think. So I'm not really being brought into thought in that sense, I don't think. So why would that make you less... More references give you context for the anger. Interesting. I think it just means that you'll remember the other reasons to be angry. Oh no. Like when women bring up things you did 10 years ago and they're upset. Interesting. Okay. Okay. They're going into paved paths rather than the intensity of cutting a new trail. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. That's a very good way of putting it. Because if you're carving out new things, let's say you're carving out new things in your mind, that's going to be a more intense experience, metaphorically, in the mind. Right? That's going to be more intense. But if you're walking down a paved road or a path that's already been walked many times and there's a pathway there, that's going to be less intense, it's going to be less destructive, less damaging. I like that visualization there of thinking of it in that way. Interesting.
Our battery's probably loose. You lose your temper and you see someone just throw an inanimate object across the room, and from an objective point of view, think, why was that person so angry at an inanimate object? But of course what happened was the feeling of anger was generated, probably even only the tiniest bit, and the brain went, oh, there's anger. So then it went back through the database and it brought back all of the feelings of anger. So that person's anger that they took out on the remote control was actually their anger at everything else in their life that's making them angry at that moment, because
That seems to suggest that it's more intense, right? Because if you're feeling a small bit of anger, but that's making you reference every single instance of anger and you just explode, that would suggest, from some perspective, from my perspective, at trying to understand this here, that seems to suggest that it's more intense. The way you just described it is more intense. Ah, interesting. Okay. Someone who's been angry more often understands it more. You understand the nuance of anger. My dad did that. Oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that. He threw a remote because he was upset about unrelated things. Why must we be mad at a remote? It's just a remote controller. It's helping us. Whatever. Sorry to hear that.
just working on association. They were habitually angry. The habit of the emotional labeling was arising, and that's why they get caught up in it. So this, to me, is really why we can't follow our emotions. Or we can't follow our emotions without first knowing what they are. Because if you're just going to follow your emotions in a very sort of simplistic way, in an unintelligent way, you'd be like, oh, I'm angry, so therefore my anger is justified. Because this is a big one. Lots of people in the alternative art scene, especially in the yoga scene and the Qigong scene, I see are very much talking about anger being a positive thing and an okay thing. Like, anger's fine, anger's productive, anger gives me power, anger is my weapon against the patriarchy killer society or something. And yeah, it's true. Like, anger can be the impulse to act, or anger can be a defense mechanism. Anger can be required. But anger is...
That's cultivated anger. Oh, I like that. I like that. That is a good example of cultivated anger, right? Because whenever you reference all the other angry things, that's cultivating the anger. So any small bit of anger explodes into this vast anger, this the force of all the anger that you've ever experienced in your life. Now, wouldn't it be nice to cultivate something better, like love or happiness or any of the other positive feelings? Wouldn't that be nice too? Sounds good.
Still a reaction if we're labeling it as anger. And the problem is that once it becomes a reaction, again, like I said, you're not really angry at that event. You're carrying with you all of the previous anger as well. Your mind is working on memory, and it doesn't matter that you shed, maybe this old event you're not angry about anymore, and you might think, oh, I'm not angry about it. It doesn't matter.
You might think.
It doesn't matter. You can't actually shed your attachment to it, and I'll tell you why. Because unless you've forgotten it, like completely forgotten it, like it's literally not in your memory, I cannot remember that event, then your brain knows about it. So when you get angry, you'll still have a generation of a feeling of anger from that event. So
I wonder if the same thing works with empathy, right? So if I'm empathetic to like watching TV shows or something, and I see other people getting angry, and then I experience anger, do I also reference that? The empathetic anger that I felt by watching somebody else be angry. I wonder how much that is included. Because if it's just a memory thing, well, I also remember other people being angry, and I also remember, very bad instances of being angry from modern media. You've all seen TV before. I wonder how much that affects us too, and how much that becomes a part of the force that is behind us influencing and adding to all of our emotions. Interesting.
You've not really...
And even if you forget it, you might still have it, true. Yeah. I guess forget is kind of used in a strange way here, but yeah. It's all included. I think so. Yeah. Empathetic anger is a thing. We see it all the time. The people inherit from the people around. Yeah, everyone's angry, and you're just angry because other people are angry. And sometimes you can even lose the reference, right? It's like, one person angry, and it just makes other people empathetically angry. And then the initial anger goes away, and now that person can just be empathetically angry with everybody else being empathetically angry, and like the actual anger is gone, but everyone's just empathetically angry. And that just gets into our subconscious or memory bank of anger that can get evoked from any small bits of anger. That sounds really awful. A lot of this just sounds pretty awful. But of course, it sounds really good with the positive emotions. If we ever flip and talk about the positive emotions, that sounds really good.
Let go of it. Not really. You might have let go of some trauma that's hurting you, but you haven't let go of the memory. So it's still going to distort your experience of anger. So is it okay to react with anger? Well, it's okay on a non-judgmental level because we're all human, but it's still not really okay. It's still not beneficial because your anger, you've labeled it, you've called it anger. As soon as you call it anger, that means it's a named feeling. And if it's named, it can't be true. And what I mean by it can't be true is you're just now going back through all of your data bank, and then this poor guy who's probably said something minorly offensive is just getting he's like in a wind tunnel. You're stuck in a wind tunnel of anger as you just let all of your rage out at the 5,000 people that have upset you over the course of your life, you know. And I see this, man. I see this, like, I think, and this is mean, it's true, and maybe this will make people angry, but I think some of the angriest people I've met, no, not angry, that's not true, but some of the most emotionally reactive people I've met are within the alternative scene. I really think they are. And I think there's a few reasons. Here's my list again. The first is often they think that their emotion is empowering them, which is not quite true. And I think also sometimes because the amount of introspective work. And I think the downside of introspective work is if you're always looking inside, then you become the center of your own universe. So
Interesting. If you're always looking inside, you become the center of your universe, right? So I guess there's a bit of a commentary that he's not explicitly saying, but sort of implying here that there's this idea that all of your emotions are valid or all of your emotions are helpful, and that's actually something that's very skillful at times, to have that understanding that all of your emotions are helping you and guiding you and they're all valid and useful, blah, blah, blah. You can have that, and that's very helpful and useful and skillful sometimes. But it can also very easily be corrupted and turned into this justification for your bad behaviors or your negative emotions. And you don't want that either, right? So there's a skillful use of it, of that sort of thinking that all of your emotions are valid, and then there's a time to go beyond that and not keep justifying your bad behaviors and keeping, generating your own negative emotions, essentially. You don't want that forever, at least. Okay. I need a haircut. Yeah, I'm probably going to get a haircut soon. I'm going to a wedding in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Going to a wedding soon. And I think I'm probably going to get a haircut for that, so I can look nice for all the pictures and stuff. But yeah, it's becoming, it was nice to have all the hair because I don't have to cut my hair. I cut my own hair, and it takes a bit of time to cut my own hair. But then at some point, it started becoming more of a hassle to have to comb my hair. I have to pick out my hair, comb it every morning to make it look presentable if I'm ever going out or if I'm streaming or anything. So it's becoming more of a hassle to actually have hair than to cut it. So I'm going to have to cut it soon for a number of reasons. But soon enough, you'll see me back to being bald. Soon enough.
gradually introspective work without the insight into the nature of self can actually cause you to become very, very self-centered and very, very selfish, self-important, narcissistic. Definitely that happens.
Definitely.
You know. Whereas people that look outwards, that doesn't always tend to be the case, you know. So I think that inward looking can do that. And once you become the center of your own universe, then you end up kind of self-justifying these kind of behaviors. So that's a problem. But I think that the reason is because of the lack of development of insight. I think that insight is what is missed. Looking inside, just putting your mind inside is useless. It really is. I put my mind inside on my breath. I put my mind inside on my dantian. I put my mind inside on my shushuma or whatever it is you're doing. It's useless unless you have the goal of developing some kind of insight into the nature of that which you're looking at. If you're simply looking inside, all you're going to do is you're going to become self-centered because you are now making yourself the focal point instead of the outside world. So this is where the insight comes in. And it's an easy trap to fall into. I've been there. Jesus Christ, I've been there. Definitely. But the insight into your emotions.
Did you hear all the emotions come up as he's remembering that he's been there, and he's got emotions of shame and guilt, I guess, and whatever else people feel. Embarrassment. He's like, Jesus, I've been there. We've all been there.
Really comes by dropping the label. So when they're saying in the classical arts, you know, do away with your emotions, well, I think they mean do away with the labels, you know. Mm-hmm. So if an emotion arises in me, what I need to do is step back from the label and simply experience the somatic feeling that's running through my body without the label. Mm-hmm. Because the more I'm able to do that, sit there with it and just kind of go, okay, that's what that is. Right, brilliant. I can follow it through my body. I start to learn how my energy moves and how my individual experience to certain things takes place. Now, what happens as you do that is you'll notice a process going on.
We don't want to forget the mental space, wherever that is, and whatever may happen there. Of course, there's a lot of body sensations that go on, but there are maybe other factors involved in your emotions too. I want to point that out. I'm sure he's well aware. But there's also that. Experience what your mental space is going and how that feels and what's going on there. That's a big part of it. Maybe that's some part of it at least too.
Let's stick with anger, okay? There's a sequential, I can't speak. There's a sequence of somatic.
And I guess that might be what he's considering mood. He hasn't explained mood yet. We're almost done. He hasn't talked about mood yet. There's a third thing, a mood, which may be what I just expressed. Well, we'll see how he explains it.
Experiences that you go through. So again, it will vary person to person, but for me, very much there's a tightening that comes first. There's that tightening, and then there's a warmth, and then even there's a kind of rising up within my body, and then I feel a kind of pressure around here, around the hair. I feel that process taking place as my chi moves through the body. And if I stay with that feeling, I can just kind of watch it playing out. And when it gets to the end of its course, it just kind of fizzles out again. It's like a cycle. It's like a little water cycle. There it goes, and there it's done. Okay, brilliant. And then by observing that process and allowing that to move through me, what it means is that the emotion is not repressed. It's not suppressed either. My actions are suppressed because I haven't acted on it. I haven't gone, because instead of reacting to the outside world and thumping this person in the face or whatever it is you want to do, instead I've taken my awareness inside and simply stayed with paying attention to that experience as it runs through. And
pay attention to the experience. No need to let it go out through random actions that are unskillful. Really interesting point about being overly introspective and how these can have negative side effects. I think even with the intent for insight, it can happen. This is why introspection and insight can be integrated and balanced with cultivating wholesomeness, Brahma Vihara, and Samadhi and Sila. Yeah, if you're looking in and you're getting in this deep whatever nonsense, but you're not getting any of the wisdom, you're not getting any of this sort of ethical behavior, it can easily corrupt itself. So introspection is not good enough. It's never enough.
what will happen is instead of it externalizing into anger, so I have actually repressed, I suppose, my action, but I've not repressed in a forceful, unhealthy way. I've just repressed by simply not giving attention to it, just by paying attention to the inside. So I haven't repressed the emotion, it's run through, but I also haven't clung to it. There's been no clinging because it's just run through me like a cycle. Because any somatic experience, anything that arises in the body, if you just pay attention to it in a neutral manner, an equanimous manner, it just kind of fades away again.
Oh, I like this too from Bitegeist here. Bitegeist feels like the problem is not labeling the emotions, but making more out of it. Meaning that there's some extrapolation that comes along with this emotion. If you feel this emotion, then that means so on and so forth. That process of assuming that it means more than actually just feeling the emotion is a big part of the problem. To extrapolate, I like that. I like that clarification too. I think I agree with that a lot. So labeling is not necessarily the only problem. It may be a problem in some instances, but also extrapolating is a big problem. And you can probably label things without extrapolating and assuming that there's more problems being referred to or created with your own mind, because that's a big part of the process. That's the issue. I like it. The extrapolation is a problem. Absolutely.
So what fucks it up is either, well, generally it's the labeling, because you'll find through meditative practice, if you're looking at that part of your awareness and you're paying attention to the emotions or the feelings, you'll find that as soon as you label it, you get caught in it. So for example, something might annoy me, or something might start that experience. So there's the tightness, there's the warmth, there's the rising up. And then if I just pay attention to it, it runs its course. But if I get the tightness and then the rising and then the warmth, I go, oh, there's anger, it stays.
Interesting.
It stays. And then I'm caught in it because now I'm clinging to it. So in that way, sorry, I thought that was going to be more comfortable sat cross-legged, but it's a bit of a, it's a weird thing. Then it stays because now I've labeled it, I've given it a reality, I've given it an individuated identity that's separate from me, because anger is separate from me. I am angry, I am experiencing anger, here is my anger, my something. Whereas a feeling is not separate from you, so it doesn't have an you're not giving it an identity, so you're not giving it a reality, you're not creating that schizophrenic existence of something that is outside you, because I am my feeling at that moment, or my feeling is me. I'm just paying attention to my feeling, and then it runs through. So it's only the separation and giving it an identity that gives it a kind of reality. And you can watch that happening if you.
It's like watering a plant and wondering why it's still growing. I like that. I also need to water my plants. Thanks for the reminder. I forgot to water my plants this morning. I gotta water my plants. I like that.
Watch the feeling come and go, it'll come and go. If you allow it to come up and then you label it, it will stay. It'll stick with you. And then watch what happens. Like, it's an interesting exercise, is when that emotion stays, a few times, don't hurt anybody, but stay with it a little bit more and see what happens. And then you'll find you'll see how it goes back through all of your previous experiences of that same anger, that kind of self-reinforcing loop that it goes through. And then memories will start coming up of things that are just unrelated to this current event. And then you realize that person that annoys you reminds you of this person that you used to know, and this person in your family, and this one that said something to you. And wow, all of a sudden you can see all of the associations that you have, and all of those associations are now unfortunately firing energy onto that one event that's triggered you. Essentially, that's the word, isn't it?
Triggered.
So that's the problem with just allowing your emotions to be a guidance system. It's also the problem with trying to sort of cultivate or indulge in feelings, because you indulge in the feeling, that's almost like labeling it, because once again it will stick. It all comes back to that same thing of just paying attention to what these experiences are as they come and go, and don't even necessarily label them, because I don't want to move them out of the realm of feelings towards emotions. So can you do that on a daily basis? Well, it's a bit long-winded, isn't it? Let's be honest. How many emotional experiences or feelings do you have over the course of a day? Whoa, quite a lot. Unless you're sat on your own, I suppose, but then you're subject to your own thoughts.
Still a lot.
And they produce emotions, so you can't really win. I guess we have a different speed. People are at different tempos, depending on how much of a sort of whirlwind they're caught up with regards to their mind. But you're still.
Does anybody remember the first time they've experienced an emotion? I don't know. Maybe some of the more, well, he talked about some of the emotions that you grew up and learn to appreciate, or, you don't experience when you're younger. So maybe you can remember some of those, but most of them, I doubt. I wonder if moods are what he calls emotions that have been habitually identified and stuck. Oh. This video is almost over. No, we've got 10 minutes. So he's got some time to explain what a mood is. So I'm still very unclear what a mood is. But it could be that. that stuckness. I think it may be just the mental aspect of a feeling or the mental aspect of an emotion. I don't even know what do you call the broad term of all the things, but anyway, we've got an emotion, which is a label for the feelings, but then there's also probably some sort of mental experience, which I think that would be called the mood. That's how I am predicting he'll go, but I'm not entirely sure. We'll find out.
You're going to experience quite a lot of them over the course of a day, so it's more like the form of analysis you do when you have the opportunity. So you do it during seated practice or during breathing practice or during set times when you've decided this is going to be some practice for you to become aware of this, or maybe even something has caused a strong emotion in your life. You've had some bad news or some good news, or it doesn't really matter, it doesn't have to be negative, does it? It could be a positive emotion,
Could be
something that
positive.
you enjoy.
I like
So
positive.
then what you do is you take yourself away and then kind of sit with it and go through this process and just sort of observe it come and go. And then you can fully experience the emotion in an unlabeled way that's not repressed, that's not suppressed, that enables the energy to flow and to move through you. So your emotion literally is a motive force, a movement that's just passing through you, not clinging. So then at that stage, if you can do this more and more, you'll find you'll gradually start to break down your labeling of the emotions in such a way. So you'll still, on a practical level, you'll still recognize anger as anger, but the more that you recognize the truth of it, the actual somatic experience of the feeling, the more the power that your previous anger has over you will start to fade. Because once you recognize the truth of something for what it is, it moves from the subconscious towards the conscious, and then it kind of loses its power over.
Interesting. I also don't feel this. When something moves from its subconscious to the conscious, it loses its power. I don't get that. I don't feel that. The mood is the setting. The sounds, the lighting, the feeling and emotion is him sitting and acting within it. The mood is the setting. I like that. I don't know if that was a pun or not, but I like it. The mood is the setting, like the mental setting, the place where your feelings sit, the mental space where your feelings sit is the mood. I think I like it. Do things become less intense when they become conscious? Is that how you guys feel? If you become conscious of something, it goes away? Or becomes less intense? I wonder.
Because it
Can't say no to something you're unaware of. True. It means that when you see something clearly, it doesn't have the same influence over you. It doesn't have to have that same influence over you. I suppose that makes a bit of sense, right? You can make the conscious choice to allow it to influence you or not, and you don't have to. He didn't say less intense, but they lose their power. Okay. I guess that does make a lot more sense. Yeah. They lose their power over you. They don't have to influence you in that same way. Not necessarily that they must not, but they don't have to. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think that's
it's only when things are in your subconscious or your unconscious that they become a kind of reactivity, a kind of fate-filled reactivity that's going to guide you on autopilot through life. And that's not what you want. You want to bring it through to the conscious realm so that you can recognize it and allow it to run its course. And then all that power will start to fade away. So then it doesn't matter which of the three camps you sit in, right? Do you sit in the camp where you want to end your emotions, or do you sit in the camp where you want to have your emotions as a kind of navigation system, or do you sit in the camp where you want to convert your negative emotions to your positive emotion? It doesn't matter what camp you're in. They're still all going to be benefited by simply becoming aware of the nature of how these things are inside your mind and how you experience them. And just to reiterate, the thing you want to experience is the effect that labeling has upon a feeling. That's really what it is, the effect that labeling has upon a feeling. And look how quickly you label things. Look how you automatically do it. Angry, sad, worried, happy, enjoyment, love, guilt, they're just there. Those labels are there straight away. And you'll enjoy telling people quite often, I am angry, like giving your label to them is a very empowering thing, or labeling them, you're upset, all these labels you give are just not helpful, because they're just anchoring them into their body, so it becomes emotion rather than a feeling. And again, this is my definition of emotion and feeling, right? It might be
Sure.
different from how it's used in the wider context. I can only define it as I define it, but in the context where I'm talking about, this is how I'm using the word emotion versus feeling. So then the third one is a mood, right?
Mood. Oh, we're here finally. The mood.
So a mood to me is just an emotion that's stayed.
The emotion that stayed. This is what Benevolent said. Let's go back. Let's go back to the prediction from Benevolent. I wonder if moods, is that what he said here? I wonder if moods are what he calls emotions that have been habitually identified and are stuck. And he says here that moods are emotions that have stayed. Wow. All the chips go to Benevolent Elephant here. Very good prediction. Okay.
It's as simple as that, really. It's an emotion that stayed. Something that became labelled to a point that it was almost overbearing, so it becomes a constant kind of trap that you're in. And this is for me one of the first things that we need to pull out of. We need the moods gone. We need the moods gone before we can start to deal with the labeling of the emotions and move towards the feelings and the kind of back to the sort of pure experience of what this is like when we deal with our sensory connection to the world. If you're caught with moods, I have a depressed mood or an angry mood, it's long term, or I'm sad or I'm worried all the time or whatever, you're stuck in that loop, then you don't have any malleability, you don't have any transience. It's kind of like a block of ice, you need to melt that ice to turn it back into water. So it's malleable and it can kind of shift around again. And that's what gives us access to a whole plethora of emotional experiences that we then start to explore through simply observing them and with equanimity. And that gives you clarity to the nature of them. And you know what? That water changes into steam, which means that it comes and goes and doesn't create any clinging to you whatsoever. So that's my take on emotions. And the final thing I want to say is
good take.
There's a kind of argument is that meditation, and to me it's not really, because it's not, understanding that is not going to lead you to a meditative state in the literal sense of the word. It's not going to lead you to samadhi, taiding or jhana or anything like this. It's not going to take you to those states, which are what I call meditation. It's more the stage that comes before. It's like mental training, mind training, heart-mind training, becoming aware of, it's like becoming aware of all of the parts before you even start to explore them, If you're building a piece of flat-pack furniture, here's your IKEA Enlightenment flat-pack furniture. It's got so many bloody parts. Before I build it, I've got to lay them all out in front of me so I can see them. And then I got to get familiar with the instruction manual. While I'm laying out all of the parts to check they're all there, because they normally forget to put some in the box, don't they? That's not building the furniture.
He's referencing some of his old annoying and angry feelings when he's talking about IKEA not putting all the parts in the box. I've never had that, I don't think, happen to me. Interesting. Okay, I like the distinction here. I really like when we make the distinction of meditation being whatever is getting us towards a particular range of mental states, which he called jhana or samadhi, or he said some other words too. And then you can have basic mindfulness training, which is not meditation. It's just being aware. It's like something that you need before you get into meditation. But mindfulness itself is probably not enough. It's definitely not even meant to get you towards those particular meditative states. Whatever gets you towards the meditative states is meditation. Mindfulness or being aware of your emotions or blah, 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 that's not going to do it. Not meditation, but helpful.
Is it? And when I look at the instruction manual, that's still not building the furniture, but I need to go through that stage in order to get to that stage. And it's the same with your sitting practice.
Yep.
The meditation comes once there's a unity that starts to arise between your awareness and an object. All meditation traditions have talked about that for a long time, and there's a very specific mechanic behind that. But there's a series of things that has to come first, because your awareness, the thing that's going to unify with an object, has to be able to reside with sort of calm concentration first. And in order to do that, we have to be able to peel back the layers of clinging and attachment and emotional disturbance and everything that sits on top of all that. It's almost like we have to wade through our psychology before we get to our spirituality. It's not almost like, it is like that.
Interesting.
So this kind of training that I'm talking about here, this just becoming aware of the nature of the emotions, is what needs to come first, you know. So if you see people saying you meditate to master the emotions, or you meditate
Peel
to
back the
become
layers.
emotionally intelligent,
Sounds like he's talking about the hindrances. Yeah. I think Dhammo is mostly coming from a Taoist tradition. So I don't know exactly what the Taoist language would be for that. But yeah, it's pretty easy to translate this more into Buddhist language. Certainly. It sounds like he's talking about hindrances. Yeah.
it's not true. Actually, you master the emotions, or you become emotionally intelligent so that you can then start to practice meditation. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. Okay, it's very important that we get that distinction, because otherwise it's a bit tail wagging the dog, you know. So that's just my thought on emotions, and feelings and moods, I suppose, to a lesser degree. Just a bit of a discussion after my practice this evening out here by the pool. It's very nice, actually. I didn't realize how hot it was out here till I put my big toe in the pool, which is nice and cold, so it's quite refreshing, actually. And it's just coming up to midnight here, so I may take a midnight dip to cool off after being sat out here for a couple of hours in a surprisingly warm evening.
That sounds very
But
pleasant.
I just thought I'd share these sort of insights for you in case they're useful or whatever. And they are a bit beginner level, I know they're beginner level, so I know if you're an experienced meditator, all of that will be completely useless, because you know.
We like to sometimes go back to the basics. Advanced basics. We don't want to get too caught up in all the cool, fancy, advanced techniques and this subtlety and that subtlety. Yeah. Go back to the beginning stages and let's learn again from the very, very, very basic things. Let's get a re-up there sometimes. We got to re-up sometimes with the most basic stuff. So let's do advanced basics. That's what we're doing here.
All of that, I'm sure. But I just feel that I want to discuss that because I do see a lot of confusion around the emotions. Are they the enemy? Are they the source of our life? Are they the guidance system? Are they something that's beautiful? Are they our empowerment? Is my personal power based on the emotion? None of those are true, and all of those are true, but all of them are irrelevant as views until you know what the damn things are. And you can experience them in an unlabeled fashion. And that to me is the first step for understanding the emotions. And I think a step that a lot of people haven't gone through. I think a lot of meditators and yogis haven't gone through it. I think that's fair to say. I'm not talking masters, I'm talking the majority of people that are involved in these traditions on a lesser scale. I'm not talking the great masters in the Himalayas, of course they've managed that. And the same in the Qigong world as well. I think it's the same, that a lot of people would benefit from doing this kind of work, so they just understand the process, you know. It's like you need to look under the hood of the car to figure out how it all works before you start trying to sort of master it, you know. It's just wise to do in that sequence. Otherwise you're talking about something that you don't really have direct experience of. So you can't give people correct guidance on how to process these things. So then if you haven't seen how they work, then just saying, you know, follow your emotion, that's not wise, you know. What are you following? Are you following a label? Are you following a label that's connected to all of your prior experiences? That's never wise. That's never wise at all. That's never a recipe for anything, you know. I mean, how many problems in the world would be solved by let's all become a lot more emotional? I don't think that's wise. And at the same time, how many problems can be solved in the world by taking away all emotions? They can't, because you become too cold. There's a sort of place in the middle, isn't there, where kind of reasoning and emotions come together, so you can...
What is too cold, I wonder? I like the turning it off and not turning it back on again. But what is it too cold? I always think about this whenever I hear these types of things where you have an analysis of the coldness of something. If the idea is that some people want to get rid of all emotions, and we say that it's too cold, are we analyzing it from the perspective of emotion, where the goal is to have more emotion? Well, obviously not, because he doesn't think that having more emotion or being driven by emotions is the best thing. So what is this sort of meta emotional analysis that we're using to evaluate whether or not we have enough emotion. Because it's not an emotional analysis. If it were purely an emotional analysis, then you want to be driven by your emotions, right? That seems to make sense. If you're only going emotional and the emotional way is the only way to analyze the thing, then you want to be driven by your emotions because that's the emotional analysis. If you're saying that you don't want any emotion, then you're not using an emotional analysis. You're rejecting the emotional analysis, get away from all your emotions. But if you're saying that both of those are wrong and you want some amount of emotion, you don't want to be too cold, well, now you're using some system that's outside of an emotional system to evaluate your emotions. And what is that system that's outside of emotion, meta emotion, to analyze your emotion? I wonder. Same thing would happen if you're thinking about people who are too intellectual or not intellectual enough, right? You don't want to get rid of all your intellect, but you don't want to be overly intellectual. So now you have the same sort of new perspective, a new evaluation system that's outside of an intellectual evaluation system that's analyzing the situation and evaluating it. What do we call that? And how does that system evaluate emotions or intellect or so on and so forth?
Empathetically sort of understand what's going on for everybody, but I think almost all problems can be assisted or helped by becoming more aware of the honesty of what the feelings are that are going through you, that are involved in that process. I think that's definitely a beneficial thing for all of us.
Definitely a beneficial thing for all of us. Wow. Thank you so much, Damo, for some nice wisdom. Again, advanced basics. Good to hear him parsing out and clarifying his perspective on emotions, feelings, and moods. I quite like it. Quite like to hear people with their precise ways of viewing the world. Very cool. Okay, well, I got nothing else at the moment, so I can chill out for a little bit longer, if we wish, but got no plans. What's up? You guys want to watch something? You guys want to talk? You guys want to listen to me? What's up? What are we going to do? Kook Shinryu. Kook Shinryu. The guy who studied with Shinryu Suzuki. Cool dude, podcaster. Kook. Haiku Zendo Chronicles. Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. This is a new video. Okay. Let's check him out. Such short videos, or podcasts rather. 5-minute podcasts we'll be listening to. Okay. Oh, other things. I'm interested in what year first-person perspective is. What year first-person perspective is? Oh, what do you mean mine? What my first-person perspective is? Oh, what am I looking at? Oh, I see. Okay. I'm looking at I got a TV in front of me. I've got a camera, and it's kind of blocking the TV partially. I've got a microphone that I can see, and you can see the things that I can see here. But there's the camera, and then behind the camera is a TV, and it's on a desk with music stuff behind it. I would show you, but I don't have any way of doing that. I guess I could turn my camera around, but you wouldn't see my camera. So I can't show you anything. The importance of ritual. Okay, that's also short. Alright, let's get into these videos. How many screens do I have? I have one screen. It's a TV. I don't know how big it is, but it's like a flat screen TV that maybe a person would have had 5 years ago, 10 years ago. A TV that would have been nice 10 years ago. Flat screen TV that would have been nice 10 years ago. That's what I have as my computer monitor today. One screen though. Okay, let's learn about a haiku, or the Haiku Chronicles.
May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Gook Audio mini podcast.
I don't know what that chant is, or I don't even know if you call that a chant. I don't know what that thing he just said was. Is it a sutra verse or something? Or some metta or something? I don't know what he just said. I mean, I heard the words, but I don't know what that is. But let's appreciate it for a moment, just because I haven't heard it. I mean, I've heard him say it a couple times, but I don't think I even listened to it ever. He's saying, let's all be happy, all beings be happy, and he says some other thing. Let's just hear it one more time.
May all beings be happy.
May all beings be happy. Now let's remember that it's the four immeasurables prayer. Okay, the four immeasurables. What are the four immeasurables? This is like the sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. That's the one, I think. The four immeasurables. Okay. Tibetan Buddhist prayer. Interesting. Immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, immeasurable equanimity. Okay, not what I was thinking. Oh, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be dissociated from the supreme happiness, which is without suffering. And may they remain in the boundless equanimity, free from both attachment to close ones and rejection of others. Free from rejection and attachment. Okay. Well, that's pretty cute. I think I like that. Whoever said that, well, that's a nice person who said that, and I appreciate that. And hopefully it helps. It helps a little bit now, I guess. Okay, so let's hear that. May all beings be happy. And of course, if we're hearing it, it's referring to you too, at least. You too. You're a part of all beings, so be happy. One part. Okay.
May all beings be healthy.
May all beings be healthy. Also referring to you. Hey, be healthy.
May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life.
May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. So there are a couple of these things that you can do yourself, right? And maybe this is helpful to guide us for doing it ourselves, and a good reminder. So, be free from harm. That's a little bit difficult to pull off by yourself. You can influence it a bit. But loving life, well, that's an easy one. Come on, let's all love life.
May all beings awaken.
And may all beings awaken. You can also do that one. Very simple. So do that yourself. Okay. All right. I just wanted to appreciate that. Well, I appreciate that. Thanks. Be happy. Be healthy. Be free from suffering. He didn't say suffering. Be free from, I don't know what he said, but be free from suffering. Love life. And there's a fifth one. I don't remember the fifth one. Okay. Well, let's appreciate that. Be free from harm. That's what it was. Yes. Okay. It sounds like a metta prayer. And we all awaken. How could I forget awakening? Maybe it's better to forget awakening? I don't know. Okay. All right. Let's appreciate all that. That's very nice. All right. On to the podcast.
Welcome to another Gook Audio mini podcast.
Okay.
I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible.
Okay.
So today we're going to continue reading from the Haiku Zendo Chronicles. And this part is headed the Zen Mind Beginner's Mind. I think this is the fifth recording on this in this series. In 1965, Marion Derby began to tape record Suzuki Roshi's morning lectures. These little talks, as Roshi called them, were very short, seldom more than 15 minutes. Usually, Roshi started off in a general, rambling way with no particular subject in mind. After 2 or 3 minutes, he would discover his subject and continue straight into his talk. Marion transcribed the tapes each week, doing rough editing as she went along. She
You loved my Leo Gura analysis. Thank you, Steve. I'm glad you appreciated the analysis. There will be more in future, so stick around if you want to see that. We also like to watch other videos and just kind of chill. Mostly chill. But sometimes we do a little bit of extra effort to analyze something more deeply. So more of that will be coming very soon.
then carefully went over each transcript with Suzuki Roshi. She was generous in typing out copies of any lectures that any one of us was particularly interested in keeping. There was talk of gathering these lectures into a book, at first referred to as Morning Talks in Los Altos. In March 1967, Marion's typed transcriptions were given to Dick Baker, then president of Zen Center, for final editing. The tentative title of Beginner's Mind was chosen after many difficulties, largely caused by his very busy schedule. Dick Baker decided to delay work on the editing, and the project was temporarily shelved. In 1968, Suzuki Roshi suggested that Trudy Dixon of Zen Center take over the final editing of Beginner's Mind. Trudy was very ill at the time. In fact, she died before the book was finally in print. Nonetheless, her profound understanding of Zen and her great ability as a writer resulted in the beautiful and powerful edition of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. The book
Is this just a history? It seems like it's just a history. I'm not sure. Since we are all one existence, you can literally taste the tea as I drink it. I wish you could. It'd be nice if I could share. Well, I can share in some sense in some parts, but I wish we could all notice the sharing at least. It'd be cool.
is a great gift to us all from both Trudy Dixon and Suzuki Roshi. All right. I have, if you go to Cuke.com and write, I don't know, you just can write ZMBM. You can read my afterword to the 50th anniversary edition of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and it tells the story of how it came about. It says Suzuki suggested, well, maybe. I thought Dick did, but doesn't matter. But this accounting of it doesn't give Dick enough credit. He was involved with the editing too, along with Trudy.
I see.
And
We're all tasting it as me.
took the book to Japan and wrote the introduction and got a publisher. All right. Anyway, that's neat. I forgot it was originally going to be called Morning Talks in Los Altos. It was gonna be called Beginner's Mind, but Weatherby, the publisher, owner of Weatherhill, something like Marcus Weatherby, said you've got to have Zen in the title. So I went Zen Mind.
Why did the smile have a face in it? Or the hat on it? Did you see that? Smiley face have a hat on it? Why does the smiley face have a hat? It's kind of weird. Oh, interesting. Did I see the Chris Langan interview? Yeah, I saw that. I didn't watch it on stream, but I saw it. Yeah, I liked it. Okay, this is just the history. The video is almost over, so I didn't really follow it, and I don't know if it was very relevant to what we generally talk about, but just the history of a book. How about that? Okay. On to the next video, learning about the importance of ritual. I like ritual sometimes. Let's learn about it.
It's this period of in between, though. It's this period where day becomes night, or in the morning where night becomes day. It's this place, this moment, this threshold of moving from one place to another. And we have these all over the place, right? We have outside the building, inside the building.
There's so many transitions, and we don't oftentimes appreciate the transition between one thing and another thing. If you're sitting down and you stand up, there's a transition between those 2 points. Inside a building, outside of a building, there's a transition space between those. And then you have feeling positive and then feeling neutral. There's a transition. Being awake and then going to sleep, there's a transition. Eating a food, not eating the food, tasting something, not tasting something. There's these transitions. And man, if we have this sort of responsibility, let's say I am experiencing something for everybody else, right? The whole world is experiencing everything, and we're all everybody, and we're all experiencing the same thing, and everybody is experiencing my experience through me. I kind of have a responsibility to experience the thing fully. I don't have to, I suppose, but wouldn't it be nice to experience something for everybody and have a lot more detail and a lot more appreciation for all the things that we can experience? So we do want to pay attention to these transition points between things and really fully feel it so that it is appreciated throughout all of conscious experience for everybody.
We have outside the group, inside the group. But in both of those, there's like that middle place where you're just walking through the door and you don't know quite, am I inside or outside? Right? Am I inside the building or am I outside the building? Am I inside this group or am I outside of this group? Mm-hmm. Life and death.
Life and death.
Some of you may have had the honor of being with someone as they died. And
Some
there's
of
a
you
place.
May have the honor of have died. Potentially.
Where that loved one, where that friend, maybe where that stranger, they're no longer living, but they're not dead either. They're in that middle place. It's a threshold place, what we call liminal moment.
Liminal space.
That place that's in between. And we see this all over the place. We can light this candle, and we can say, okay, well, I know that when I light this candle, there's going to be a flame, but there's a moment between unlit and lit. There's that lighting moment, that liminal moment in between where it's not one or the other, but it's becoming. And in that becoming, well, just notice what you notice. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it over here in the candle. Notice what you notice.
Let's redo that so we can all notice together. So notice what we notice. Okay?
Notice. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it over here in the candle. Notice what you notice. So some might have been expecting there's going to be a big flame. Or maybe there's going to be like a little jiggly spark, or maybe it's not going to light at all. There's this place of uncertainty, this place between unlit and lit, this place of uncertainty. And we have this throughout history, these times between here and there, between what was and what will be, or even what is and what can become, that our ancestors said this is a great place for ritual. Because ritual does a couple things.
Does ritual create more permanence? Yes and no? Yes and? Maybe? Presumably, for some people, the ritual is an easier thing. It's less sticky. So everything that we do is a ritual from some ways of analyzing it. But a lot of the rituals are unskillful and extremely, extremely sticky. What I mean by that is they invade the space of all actions. If you do particular rituals, they cannot be dropped. For example, I like TikTok. If I look at TikTok videos, I start to hear all these songs and it becomes a ritual. I start to think about the songs and I'm scrolling through and I'm like, oh, this 15 seconds, and I play it in my mind and I hear the video and I scroll through another one and I hear the next 30 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever, and it becomes a ritual thing. I'm just scrolling through. And now, after that, that ritual becomes habitual. Now I always want to go through TikTok, and even if I don't have my phone with me, I'm playing through that ritual in my mind. I just randomly hear these songs. I'm a savage, classy, bougie, ratchet. I don't know what the modern TikTok songs are because I haven't used TikTok in a long time. That becomes habitual. It becomes a ritual. And you can't drop it. It becomes very difficult to drop because it's a sticky ritual. So when you try to sit down and still yourself, you can't do it because all these rituals keep replaying themselves. But when you get into these sort of more conscious rituals, whatever they may be, based on whatever tradition you may have, they are much easier to drop. So you get into those rituals, they stamp out all the other very sticky, invasive rituals, and then you have this sort of permanence and attachment to the ritual that you've developed, but it's not a very strong attachment. It's not a very strong permanence in some sense. And then when you sit down, or whenever you choose, whenever you so please, to drop all the rituals, to stop any of this sort of attachment process, you can do that because the ritual isn't as sticky as the unskillful rituals that we develop habitually, unconsciously. That's one way to put it.
For one, it brings people together. And when people come together, what we know is that their anxiety level goes down. They feel like, oh, I'm not in this by myself. When we bring ritual into something,
Anxiety is one of those very, very sticky rituals, habits that you can't just drop. I mean, if you're very good at it, you can, but it's very difficult to just drop anxiety. If you have it, it kind of just comes whenever, and it invades the space of other things, and it makes it very difficult to drop all attachments or whatever it is that you're trying to drop.
and a ritual is just an intentional, symbolic act that doesn't actually do something mechanical, right? Lighting a candle for light is not ritual. Lighting a candle when you already have light is ritual. And so they created rituals to help us get from here to there. It brought community together. It also brought an ease. Now, our ancestors didn't know this, but ritual actually lowers the cortisol levels in our body.
Interesting.
It improved.
Rituals strengthen the intentional manifestation of physical reality. That'd be a good way of putting it. It strengthens the intentional manifestation of physical reality, but it also allows for, well, if you have the rituals that are a part of these particular traditions that we're talking about generally, then you also have the opposite effect where you're strengthening the intentional manifestation, but you can also not do that. Since you have the strength to intentionally manifest physical reality or every type of reality, you can also intentionally not manifest. You can also do the opposite.
Our memory, it helps us with deep thinking. So there are benefits to bringing ritual into life. Also, it creates what I like to call like a soul muscle memory. A soul muscle memory that if I do this ritual every time the sun goes down, then I get in my body that, hey, it's going to be okay when the sun comes down. Mm-hmm. Things are going to be okay when that person moves from life to death. These liminal moments are these precious times that could be filled with anxiety, thinking about the trauma of the past or the anxiety of what could be in the future. So ritual helps us reduce the stress, and it helps us be right now. Because when we focus on that liminal moment, we're no longer behind us, we're no longer in front of us, we're right now. There's a story of a man who was going through a town. He had never been there before, and he got to the graveyard. And in the graveyard, he was just passing by, he saw that there was a name, and it would say 17 years, 35 days. or 27 years, 18 days. All these really small numbers. And he went to a shop and he said, why are people dying so young? Like, you don't look that young. And he said to this traveler, well, people live on this earth for quite some time. But in our graveyard, we only mark the days and the years that they were truly present. That they were truly present.
Interesting.
When we talk about liminal moments, life is the liminal moment between birth and death. And if life is the liminal moment, when we can be filled with anxiety, when we can be unconscious lost, wouldn't it be cool if we could bring a little more ritual into our lives
That sounds pretty cool.
before our flames go out?
I like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. That was pretty cool. And just a note, I don't think this was a particularly like spiritual video or like super consciously like, conscious sort of consciousness, focused type of video. Seems to just have been like a more kind of practical, everyday life kind of thing. Embodied men's leadership training. So, that kind of stuff. But I like it. It's pretty good. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Okay, more videos. All right. Let's check it out. The Four Liberations for Meditation with Yongye Mingyur Rinpoche. I think I like this guy. He's a very silly person. I like silly people. I've seen some of his videos. Okay.
For the meditation, there's another important thing is what we call four liberations. So the first is the primordial liberation. So primordial liberation meaning we are already liberated from beginning. We don't need to liberate again.
You are already liberated. One of the four liberations. You already did it. Congratulations. We've all been liberated. Nothing more to do. That one accomplished. Very good.
So for example, for the meditation,
Lotus
the most
Point Master
important
now.
is awareness. And that awareness with us all the time, no matter who you are, where you are. And that awareness is more than thought, more than emotion, more than feeling, right? So awareness is like sky, and then thought, emotion, perception, memory, all these are like cloud. So no matter what kind of cloud comes, it doesn't change the sky, the essence of sky. The beautiful cloud, ugly cloud, blue sun shining, or dark with the hurricane in the night. It doesn't change the nature of sky. Sky is always free from beginning. So that is the primordial liberation, already free. And the second is what we call the self-liberation. So self-liberation, when you meditate, awareness, right? The awareness practice. So first you have to recognize the awareness when you meditate. So there's the view. You already understand, right? Awareness meaning knowing, knows what you're thinking, feeling, doing, seeing, experiencing, all this awareness. So when we meditate, first it's quite difficult to connect with awareness itself without using support. So we can use support like breath. So breath is to remind us to connect with awareness, breathing in, breathing out. So eventually, not only the breath is become support for you, actually what you see, what you hear, the sound, the visual object, the sound, the smell, the taste, sensation, thought, even emotion, everything become to help to recognize the awareness, support for your meditation. So that's what we call self-liberation. No need to get rid of thought, emotion, even negative emotion, even strong emotion, even crazy monkey mind. So crazy monkey mind also becomes support for your meditation. So this is the self-liberation. And number 3 is what we call the direct liberation. So this
Direct liberation. Oh. What do I think of Krishnamurti? Which one? I haven't watched enough of J. Krishnamurti. Jiddu? Is that his name? I haven't seen a lot of Krishnamurti. But from what I've seen, I like him. He's got a lot of discernment. Seems like a very cool dude. UG Krishnamurti, that's a whole other subject. That guy is crazy. Did analysis of Lotus Born Master. You implore. Oh. You've watched it twice. Okay, Jiddu. Yeah, I like Jiddu. Jiddu Krishnamurti. Okay, I've watched a little bit of this Lotus Born Master from Shambhala. It's a couple of them. I wonder if these videos are... I would assume that they're all copyrighted and have heavy protection from YouTube, since these are like feature films. So I don't think I can watch it on stream. But I've seen a bit of it.
liberation is more with the present, and special with the open awareness. So when we meditate, our mind, just awareness, be with awareness itself. No need to, you don't have to use any object. First you have to use object. Then eventually, not using any object. Like awareness is like light here in this room. In the space, there's a light right now. There's space between you and me, or between my video, between this video and you. Mm-hmm. There's space, and this space, it has light. How you see light? You cannot see light in the space easily. You need to see light on something. Maybe you see on the screen now. You see light, my face, or you see light on the wall, ceilings, floor, something like that, right? So that's the first we practice awareness connected with object. Eventually, be itself, awareness be itself. So there's open awareness, just direct connect with awareness.
How much do I hate Ayn Rand? I think a small amount. I don't know. I don't know if I hate Ayn Rand. I don't know enough about objectivism to have a particular position. I've never read any of her books. I don't know anything about objectivism. I've got nothing against objectivism. I don't know. I used to quite like libertarianism, so I think I might like Ayn Rand. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that question directly. I don't know enough about Ayn Rand. Yeah. I don't know.
To direct connect with the space. To see the light directly. No need reflect light on something. And number 4 is the complete liberation.
Complete liberation.
So meaning is actually everything, all the phenomena is liberated. We all have this, our fundamental great quality.
It sounds exactly like the first one, right? The primordial liberation. Is that what he called it? The primordial liberation sounds very similar to this complete liberation. I like it. I like the similarity.
So you don't need to look liberation out there. It's in you, out there, up there, down there,
Okay.
everywhere. Liberate
It's
from
in
inside,
directions.
liberate from outside, liberate in between. So what we call pure perception. So once you know this point, everything is liberated for you. Easy. So complete liberation.
Easy. Okay. The 4 liberations. Primordial, direct, first and last, and then there's, what are the other ones? Complete, self, I see. Self-liberation, primordial liberation, direct liberation, complete liberation. All the liberations. Okay. Okay, guys, I gotta go soon. Well, I don't have to, but I don't really have anything else. Maybe a primordial liberation is emphasizing the awareness aspect, and complete liberation is emphasizing the all-pervasive aspect. Everything is liberated. You're liberated already. First step. You don't really need to be aware of it. You're just already liberated. Second liberation, the self-liberation. You are aware of it. It's you being liberated, and that's nice, I guess. Direct liberation, all of your experiences, they're cool, and yeah, there's liberation there. And then the complete liberation, everything is liberated. Throughout everything, not just you, everything is liberated. Yeah, different emphases, but still all liberation. I like it. Okay, yeah, I don't really have anything, I haven't been preparing, so I've been hanging out with my family quite a bit for the last week, and no time to prepare. I haven't been watching any videos, so I have not been gathering lots of videos to put into the queue for me to watch. So I've got nothing, really. Oh! Maybe I do have something. Guru Viking is streaming right now about jhana, ego, and orgasm. Lee Brazington, Shinzen Young, Chelsea Fasano. Oh, wow. And Dr. J. Sanguinetti. I like that guy. They've been streaming, I guess, for an hour. Oh, wow. Hey, let's check these guys out for a bit before I go, because that'd be kind of cool. But beyond that, I don't have anything else.
Interesting idea.
I think I'll be back on Monday with our regularly scheduled programming, so 3 times next week. But I'm not entirely sure. It may just be Wednesday and Friday. It may not be Monday. I don't know. I don't really have quite clear plans for what I'll be doing, but we'll find out. Oh, this is good. Oh my goodness, this is good. Oh my goodness. Okay, I like this. I had a friend who's been asking me about the differences between the types of jhanas, and I told him that Lee Brazington talks about it quite a bit, and also who's my other guy? Daniel Ingram talks about it, but I don't know where they talk about it. I have no idea where they've talked about it before. But the first topic here is the difference between the Sutta jhanas and the Visuddhimagga jhanas, which is kind of a big important, very big important difference. They're very different intensities and whatever. So I'm wondering about all the different levels between, and I wonder if they're getting into that. I think they will. Complete absorptions, nimittas, do jhanas confer in evolutionary. Okay, that's not very important to me. Orgasmic jhanas, jhanas in lineage. Okay. How enlightened was Buddhaghosa? What a question. Sutta versus Abhidhamma versus the Visuddhimagga. Okay, these are some cool topics I'm interested in. Well, let's go and check it out. We're just going to start from the beginning. That's not the beginning. I'm going to start.
Ghosha, and consider possible conflicts between its jhana system and those of the Sutta and Abhidhamma literature.
Okay, we're going to have all the literature fight each other. Suttas versus Visuddhimagga versus Abhidhamma. They're all different. Must they all conflict? They must fight to the death, apparently. Let's watch them fight.
Chelsea reveals fascinating research on the neuroscience of pleasure and its relationship to meditational bliss. Jay shares research on cognitive bias and religious belief, and the group asked the question if jhana and kriya phenomena are actually forms of epileptic seizure. So without further
Kriya's seizures? Epileptic seizures? Interesting. I don't know enough about Kriya. Isn't that just like they're like jerks, right? You meditate and you jerk a little bit. Why would we call that a seizure? Oh, I'm intensely interested in this. I was thinking about this recently that I was hanging out with some of my family members and we're all hanging out and joking and stuff. And, you know, people are funny and they like to laugh a lot. And I started watching people like laugh and these very intense, you know, belly laughs and like falling out of their seat. And I started like seeing it as like Kriya. It seemed like to me like a Kriya phenomena, you know, like sort of like crazy Kundalini energy flowing through them and his uncontrolled jerking motions. And it was very kind of interesting to watch and also feel as I'm like laughing and jerking around and, you know, whatever, as Kriya phenomena. And now I can, I guess, think of it as epileptic seizures. I'm fascinated by this topic. Let's hear more. Let's hear
Urdu,
more.
Shinzen Young, Chelsea Fasano, Dr. Jay Sanguinetti, and returning special guest, Lee Brazington.
Special guest. He says it like Dr. J and Shinzen and Chelsea are part of the show. Like it's all their show. And Lee Brazington is coming on. We're going to have more and more people as we continue this conversation too. It's going to be great. 5 people now. Okay, let's hear it. Welcome to the show.
That's great to join you guys again. Last time was so
What's
much
up, Lee?
fun. I'm really looking forward to this one as well.
Yeah, it was so fabulous. The last episode. This is actually the 8th episode of this very popular, it's turned out to be, conversation series between Shinzen Young, Chelsea Fasano, and Dr. Jay Sanguinetti. And this episode sees the return of Lee Brazington.
Welcome, Lee.
So on the last episode of this series, number 110 of the Guru Viking podcast, Lee overviewed his work as co-author and meditation subject in the 2013 paper, Case Study of Ecstatic Meditation, fMRI and EEG Evidence of Self-Stimulating a Reward System. And from there, we went on to have such a wonderful conversation about so many topics. We covered death, bliss, immortality. It's really the whole smorgasbord, I think.
Smorgasbord.
And something that came up towards the end of that episode was a definitional issue of hard and soft jhana, pointing to what seems to be variation among teachers in the...
Is the main difference between Sutta jhanas and the Abhidhamma and the Buddhaghosa jhanas the 4 jhana factors versus 5 jhana factors? I thought they were pretty similar, just the Abhidhamma was more detailed. Interesting. I've always heard it as the Sutta jhanas are very simple, right? Like you and I could go into Sutta jhanas by meditating for an hour. Be very easy. We could just sit there and meditate and we'll be there in no time. We're there. But the Abhidhamma, the Visuddhimagga jhanas are like way more intense. You got to be sitting there meditating for like 24 hours. You got to have this nimitta that's totally engrossing. You literally can't think or have any sort of physical experience for very extended periods of time, blah, blah. This is sort of how I've heard the distinction. The Visuddhimagga are like crazy jhanas, and the Sutta jhanas are very simple that anybody can get into. That's sort of like the main difference. And he just called it hard and soft jhanas. So that's how I've always heard it. But of course, I'm getting my information from Lee Brazington, and I've never read any suttas. Maybe I've read some suttas. I've never read any suttas, and I've never read the Visuddhimagga, so I'm not sure. And I don't even know how much the Abhidhamma is. I don't know what the Abhidhamma talks about. So that's my very, very basic understanding. Surely we can get a better understanding from Lee Brazington because he likes to teach and he likes to read and talk about this stuff. So if you get it directly from him, as we will right now, should we get a more clear understanding?
instruction of these states, but also quite some debate about what qualifies as a jhana.
Oh, you just think in your reading, the Sutta jhanas are not soft, not explicitly soft, just less clear. Interesting. Okay, so it gives that ambiguity enough to make it seem like it can allow for softness. Interesting. Oh, that's interesting.
So perhaps to start, Lee, I'm wondering if you could illuminate these terms for us, hard and soft jhana. And then perhaps by way of follow-up, another question that arose in the last episode.
Not familiar with what jhana is. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I doubt we'll get into what jhana is because we're talking about This is like the 8th episode in the series. Okay. Well, jhana, let's explain jhana a little bit. It's a particular mental state. Some people call it samadhi. If you're familiar with that, other people using the word samadhi in different traditions. It's absorption leading to a particular type of mental state. There's 4 main mental states, and the 4th one has a further 4 that are more detailed. But there are essentially 4 mental states that are called jhanas. This is a part of the Buddhist literature, and they are mental states that you get while you meditate. Or that is actually what meditation is getting into those states. However you want to define that. It's a particular mental state that feels very nice, they're very pleasant, and they're considered to be absorption. Satori? No. I don't think... You get really strange when we start talking about Zen words. So maybe we don't want to get into Zen language. Zen language, let's just say Zen language doesn't refer to anything because it never refers to anything. Zen language is just nonsense. If you're talking Zen language, it doesn't mean anything. Whenever somebody says Zen stuff, it doesn't refer to anything. Just drop it. And if people are being Zen, it doesn't mean anything, which is good because you don't want anything to mean anything and refer to anything. Satori is something Zen. It doesn't mean anything. Just drop Zen. This is more, let's say, we'll just talk about more Theravada, sometimes Vajrayana. We'll just say it in Theravada language. Absorption. A particular type of meditation where you absorb into things. Zen, if you're talking Zen, Satori, or even Zen Samadhi, it means something a little different. It's very broad and it doesn't mean anything. Zen doesn't mean anything. Just drop Zen. No one cares about Zen. If you care about Zen, you're doing something very wrong. Okay, sorry.
Why
Let's
are
keep
there
going.
jhanas in the first place?
Those are the jhanas.
Is it possible to speculate if there are any evolutionary advantages to these states?
So hard and soft jhanas, Visuddhimagga and Sutta jhanas, monastic and lay jhanas,
Lay jhanas.
jhana heavy and jhana light. There's lots of ways of talking about this.
Half
So-
joking. Okay.
The jhanas, the word jhana means meditation. That's it, simple. But they're
Absolutely.
concentration states, and there is a huge spectrum. At one end, there is at least one teacher who thinks you can be walking around and be in the jhanas. And at the other end, when you're in a jhana, you're oblivious to everything in the universe except what you're focused on, animitta. And you can find everything along the way in between. So when we use the term hard and soft or Visuddhimagga and Sutta, really what we're trying to distinguish is the jhanas as described in the suttas and the jhanas as described in the later literature. Now, those who are fans of the later literature, of course, say, well, it's the same thing. But if you read the Visuddhimagga carefully and you read the suttas carefully, there's definite differences there. So maybe the real question is, what were the jhanas that the Buddha was practicing? Well, unfortunately, because we're here now, we obviously weren't there then, or if we were, we weren't paying attention, or we wouldn't be here now. So we don't know.
I think he made a half error with nimitta there. Oh, interesting. Because you don't need to be absorbed with the nimitta? Doesn't matter? I think it matters. What's your understanding? And understand his understanding and understand your understanding. Let's get through all the understandings. Should one not be absorbed in nimitta?
Exactly what the Buddha was practicing. I suspect that what I teach is not.
Nimitta is essentially about the transition into first jhana, not relevant whether it stays or not. Oh, okay, interesting. Okay. So you don't need to keep focus on the nimitta. I guess you keep it if you can, but it goes away and that doesn't really matter. And it's only for the first jhana. Okay.
The same depth of concentration as the Buddha and his monks were experiencing. I mean, after all, they were on lifetime retreat. They were on retreat every day. They were meditating 6, 8, or more hours a day. Most lay people, yeah, they're lucky to get in an hour. Maybe they're good. They get in 2 hours a day. And they have all the other stuff going on in their lives that, yeah, the monastics didn't have. So the depth of concentration that's available, it just isn't quite as deep. One thing we can see is the evolution of the depth of concentration according to the current official definition of jhanas. So we have what's in the suttas. In there, it mentions that one drenches deep, saturates, and suffuses one's body with the rapture and happiness, etc. So clearly there's bodily awareness available when you're practicing what's described in the suttas. That's a contentious point as well, because the word kaya can mean collection or physical body, just like the English word body, body of water, or physical body. So there, yeah, even though it uses the word body, people argue over it. Whereas when you get to the Abhidhamma, there is one pointedness added to the first jhana, and the understanding of body becomes body of mind or being or something like that. They also introduced jhana 1.5 between first and second jhana, because they've changed the words vitaka and vichara from meaning thinking and examining, which is what they mean throughout the suttas, to initial and sustained attention. And since they couldn't have thinking, examining, and one-pointedness at the same time, they just changed the meaning of the words. By the time you get to the Visuddhimagga, there is complete absorption. For the Visuddhimagga jhanas, you need a nimitta. Nimitta means sign, but frequently it's a circle of light. And
Okay, circle of light.
I understand that neurologically what's going on is that when you get concentrated enough, there are random firings throughout your brain, including in your visual cortex.
Random.
And these random firings start showing up initially as a diffuse white light. And as the random firings become more predominant, the firings are in proportion to the density of the neurons, which in your visual cortex, there's a circle of densely packed neurons right in the center. And that's what you see as a circle of light. If you're concentrated enough, you will absorb into that to the point where there is no body sensations, no sounds, no passage of time. There is the nimitta and nothing else. Now, the Visuddhimagga says there are other things other than the visual nimitta. They can be a touch nimitta. But anyhow, you are so absorbed into this sign that you're unaware of anything else in the universe.
Okay. The
So we
sign of
see
the
this,
first jhana.
spectrum of awareness of the body and being able to drench, steep, saturate, and suffuse your body, all the way up to where, your body's completely gone. For me, what's important is what can you do? I mean, okay, so let's say the Visuddhimagga jhanas are the real jhanas and everything else is a pale imitation. Well, to get to the Visuddhimagga jhanas, you need to go on 3, 4, 6 month long retreat and practice very diligently. And for most lay people, that's not compatible with lay life. So even if that is the best jhanas, it's not useful because you can't do it. So for me, what can I teach people that will enhance their insight practice? In other words, what sort of concentration techniques can I teach them? And so what I wind up teaching them is, well, what seems to naturally occur. People.
Interesting. So, okay, this is fairly interesting. He wants to help people where they are now. Now, that doesn't seem to... The way that he explained that is kind of strange to me. Maybe we just have different goals, right? Of course, certainly the lay people and the monastics seem to have differing goals or maybe differing approaches to the goal, whatever the goal may be. And I think that may be a better way of expressing it, but helping people where they are, and that seems to be fine. If you want to help people in their normal daily lives and only nudge them a bit to improving their lives, reducing their suffering, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, that seems to be very acceptable. But that wouldn't diminish the power of, or it wouldn't even have anything to say about the goal of the higher level jhanas, which may be strange to consider them to be goals even, but okay. I like this is a good clarification, I think, how he's thinking about this. The higher level jhanas or the harder jhanas or whatever, the high level monastic jhanas may be what is best in some sense. It may be helpful for a monastic type of goal, if we're thinking in goal orientation, but that goal may not be compatible with what a normal everyday person, a lay person, would want to do. So don't bother with that. Don't even try to get into those levels of jhanas, because it's not necessary for you if that's not your goal. Let's just do this sort of easier, more achievable, softer jhanas. I think that's one way of expressing what he's saying here.
Stumble into these states all the time at a level that more or less corresponds to what I'm teaching. And so that takes us to the second question. Why do we stumble into these states? It's really common. I would say 25% of meditators who are serious meditators, willing to go on multiple residential retreats, willing to go on, say, a month-long retreat, I'd say 25% of those people are stumbling into one or sometimes even more of these jhanas. So do they provide an evolutionary advantage? I doubt it. I
think it's perfectly good for to aim for the hard jhanas as a layperson. Even monastics probably don't stabilize them. Worst that happens is you aim for the hard jhanas and you hit the soft jhanas. Yeah, as long as you don't beat yourself up about it or something. Yeah, the beating yourself up is the part that's completely unnecessary. Yeah. And Lee Brazenton, hopefully he'll talk about his experience with the harder jhanas, but he's talked about it before, and he said something like getting into the hard jhanas, the level of access concentration to even experience something like a nimitta was well beyond what he considered the fourth jhana in his system. So he has a particular system of defining the jhanas, and in order to get into the fourth jhana that he defines is well surpassed to even get into access concentration to experience a nimitta, to see the first jhana, to get into the first jhana. And he said he took a very long retreat to experience, and he got into a very long retreat and he experienced a nimitta, and he got into the first jhana for a very, very, very short period of time. And a hardcore one of the Thai forest tradition retreats. He did that for I think 4 months, and he got into the first jhana one time for a couple of minutes, and he didn't stabilize it for very long. But he got to that level, and it was well beyond his typical level of fourth jhana, which is pretty cool. Every jhana is being experienced now, but we're not aware of it. Well, that's one way of thinking about it. Not everybody thinks of it in that same way. Some people think of it as we experience all the jhanas and you remove your hindrances, and once the hindrances are removed, then you can see what is underlying the hindrances. So you're being hindered by the hindrances. When you remove the hindrances, you have the jhanas underneath it all. So all your jhanas are being experienced. It's just that you remove the hindrances to see them. That's one way of thinking about it. It's not necessarily the case, though. But yeah, you can think of it in that way. You're not aware of all the experiences that are underlying whatever it is that you're experiencing now. But if you are getting rid of all of your distractions, then you can see underneath your experiences, and you'll see the jhanas.
Snap your fingers, right? Does being able to snap your fingers provide you with an evolutionary advantage, or is that just a secondary side effect of the way our hands are built? Right? I think the jhanas are a secondary side effect of other things in our minds, the way our minds are built. I mean, the fact that I can teach people to do this, and I had the same success rate on my very first retreat as my teacher Ayakema was having on her retreats, and is the same as the success rate I have today when I teach a retreat.
Interesting.
It's all about how our human minds are constructed. I just know to tell you, hey, lift up the carpet, there's a trap door underneath, but the trap door is already in your mind. So then the question becomes, not why are our hands built so that we can snap our fingers, but what do we have that does provide an evolutionary advantage such that we fall into these states? And I think it's different for each of the jhanic states. The first jhana, so the primary constituents are piti and sukha. Piti we could translate, well, usually it's rapture, euphoria, ecstasy, delight. I want to translate it as glee. So a physical release of energy, a pleasant uprushing release of energy. And then sukha, which is joy or happiness. A number of students, not the majority, but a significant minority, have mentioned that when they experienced the first jhana for the first time, it had a sexual feeling to it. Ayakema responded by saying, yeah, well, it's a lot of physical pleasure, and sex is our most common experience of physical pleasure. But there's a even subset of those who talk about it having a sexual connotation to it, who speak of it as being downright orgasmic. One of my students referred to the first jhana as the orgasmatron. Now, the most interesting thing is that women report it being orgasmic about 10 times as often as men reporting it being orgasmic, which makes me think that the first jhana perhaps is more like female orgasm than male orgasm.
That's fascinating. If you want your girl to orgasm, you got to make her relax a lot to get into the first jhana. And all you ladies out there, maybe do a little bit of meditation. Get yourself in the mood. How cool is that? I wonder why that only applies to, why is it 10 times as many women calling that orgasmic than men? That's fascinating. It also seems like, and it's kind of like weird, because it would seem like one way of reading that would be that you have to concentrate a lot in order to get orgasms for a certain subsection of people, and it seems to be like mostly women. And another subsection of people don't have to concentrate at all, and they experience some sort of physical pleasure, but it's not, you don't really have to pay attention to it. You don't have to be absorbed in it. That seems kind of weird. Well, anyway, I don't know, just random thoughts. I gotta go soon, so we're gonna pause. Well, I want to keep going a little bit because I'm very interested in this. I'm gonna listen to this definitely as I continue my day, but I gotta go pretty soon. So let's hear a little bit more, and then we'll pause and wrap it up.
But I think we're tapping into our ability.
I think lady orgasm may be a tendency for a full body and a whole state, whereas the man orgasm has a tendency to stay more at the physical organ. Really? Man. What's going on, guys? Y'all gotta step it up. Get a more full body, full experience, mental state, also vibratory orgasm. Well, there are things you can do if you want to do some research, maybe. But okay, interesting.
We're tapping into something that gave us the drive to reproduce, the pleasure associated with reproducing, to generate the first jhana. And I suspect now I've probably talked long enough, and there might be some other questions that come along at this point. Or
Okay,
comments.
maybe I should pause before the
So
questions.
Chelsea, did you want to say something at this point?
I think, the intersection of mysticism.
Chelsea, where's Chelsea? Where are you, Chelsea? What is this new place? Where's your Chelsea? Orgasm, Chelsea. Almost as bad as what did Shinzen say that one time? What did Shinzen say? It was so what the heck did Shinzen say? Do you remember this benevolent? Shinzen said something. It was like sharing the bed. I don't remember what he said. He said something that was very weird and very sexual, and I don't remember. Anyway, well, that's the unfortunate consequence of being the only woman in the room sometimes. All the sexual comments go directly towards her. Anyway, let's hear what she has to say, and we'll move on. She coaches relationships and sex, so it's not quite as bad. Okay, not quite as bad.
Contemplative practice and pleasure is a deep passion of mine. So I have a lot of thoughts on the sort of likely neurological mechanisms of what is probably occurring in those first jhanas. But before I delve into that, I would love to hear your and Shinzen's thoughts on what you two think is going on, or why some people would be more likely to experience that than others. I know you've said that it varies among students. So I think that would be really interesting to explore. And then let me know when you want me to take over on the neurological theories that I think are probably occurring there.
Okay, well, she's just going to throw it off. Everyone's throwing it off to everybody else. I think this is a fine stopping point. She's so collaborative, right? Isn't that nice to make sure everybody's included? Hey, what do you think, Jay, before I get into it? Shinzen, what do you think first? I'll come in after. That's nice to make sure everyone's included. All right. Watch that. Go watch that. It's Guru Viking. It's his most recent thing. It just finished streaming, I think. It's a short episode compared to all the other ones. Anyway. I like Guru Viking. Excuse me. I like Guru Viking. I'm definitely going to be watching this a little bit later. But I must go now. I must go. So I will go. And catch you all another time. I think on Monday I'll be back. But I'm not entirely sure, so I'm not entirely sure. I'll let y'all know in the Discord if I'm streaming or not. And soon enough we'll be back to our regularly scheduled schedule. How do I say that? We'll be back to our regular schedule soon enough. Okay. May all beings have great bliss, equanimity, and well-being. Yes, that sounds good. That sounds good. Okay. Yeah. Y'all be good. Take care of yourself. That's pretty important. And have a nice weekend. Yeah. No goodbyes, only see you later. Yes. So long. Au revoir. I bid you adieu. Auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss. I don't know how to say that in any other language. Sayonara?